Okay, we're going to call this meeting to order, this discussion session to order this morning. It is 8 a.m. The date is May 13th, 2019. And the purpose of this meeting this morning is the 3 interviews that we have set up for our candidates for the interim superintendent. The purpose of the discussion session today are we're going to interview our 3 finalists. We have Dr. Moxley, then we have Dr. Parla, and then Ms. Yost, who will be the last candidate. At this time, welcome.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to introduce everyone. We have our Vice Chair, Mrs. Tiffany Justice, Dr. Schiff, Ms. Rosario, Ms. Barenborg,
good morning.
our board attorney, Ms. Diagresta. Of course, you know Dr. Vogel, who is our superintendent consultant with us, John Reichard, who is our HR consultant, and obviously you're familiar with Andrea from FSBA. Also in the audience we have with us Dr. Edwin Suit, who is our executive director of HR, and then we have Miss Michelle Oakes, who is our she's new with the district, so she helps us with employee relations and negotiations. And then also we have Ms. Heather Clark, who is our director of ESE. And then back here with us we have Ms. Peggy Poisel, who has been the executive assistant for our superintendents for many years, our public relations officer, Kristen Maddox, and our everything, Ms. Nancy Esplin. She's the board executive assistant. I want to say thank you for coming in on such a short notice today, and your willingness to work with the School District of Indian River County on an interim basis. We take this responsibility very serious, and we look forward to working and collaborating with the person that we choose to fill this important position. We're on a tight schedule today, and we will have about 1 hour for this interview. We may not get through all our questions today, but we are committed to getting through as many as we can. You will have about 7 minutes in each area of leadership, which will be led by different board members. We will be using utilizing Ms. Diagresta with our keeping us on time. You will hear an alert at 6 minutes, and at the 6 minutes, that means we have 60 seconds to wrap up that section. So I'll give the floor back over to the board member, whoever that section is, to in that last 60 seconds. We will be interviewing all 3 finalists today and hope to make our decision by this afternoon. So anyways, with that, let's get started. First of all, if you would just give us a little bit of background about your educational and work experience and why you would like to be our interim superintendent.
Right. Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I have a very diverse background in my educational career. First of all, I am a UCF graduate. I do have 3 degrees from that institution, and I am homegrown here in Florida, and so I am very proud of the fact of being homegrown. I have served as a business education major and teacher at a high school level, and then most of my career has been at the administrative level, either an assistant principal at elementary and high school, and I was the director of our technical center, or technical college now as they're known, and I was pleased to see that you have a technical college here at the district as well. So that gave me the experience of a pre-K all the way through adult. I have district level experience as an assistant superintendent for human resource services and school administration, which covered a wide range of administrative responsibilities at the district level and as associate superintendent in Orange County for 4 years. That gave me the opportunity to see a mid-sized district and then a very, very large district, to see the economy of scale and the different ways you go about the work at the district level. Returning to Lake County as superintendent for 9 years. That 9-year time period served 2008, which, as you know, the economy changed drastically. So 5 of the 9 years was spent with some very challenging issues facing districts across the state of Florida and the nation as a whole. And since I retired in June of 2017, I have been working as an adjunct professor for National Lewis, teaching the doctoral ed leadership program, and I have been doing some consulting work as a part-time senior consultant for MGT.
Okay, thank you. Can you share with us what you feel that some of your greatest strengths are?
My greatest strengths, and that's really what led me to come and apply for the interim superintendent, is that, you know, when you get to the end of drop, you think you're ready to retire, and then you realize you still have a lot to contribute, and I'm very passionate about public education. But I think the strengths that I bring to the table are the experiences that I've gained over my career in policy, finance. My dissertation was in strategic planning. I think one of the highlights of my time as superintendent is I was able to partner the strategic plan with a strategic finance plan, where you really get into return on investment and look at how you're utilizing your resources to get that return that impacts students in the classroom, because that's really the main thing, is student academic achievement for all students. And so that's, I think, where I would say my strengths are, along with leadership. I'm very calm, very inclusive, and very responsive.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So, in looking at Indian River County, what area do you think you can make the greatest positive impact in the time that you're serving here as our interim?
Well, that's a great question. I think what you see today is the consistency you will see throughout my time working with your school district. I'm very calm, very responsive. I'm a great listener. I am a great connector. I connect things. I connect the dots. And I think one of the greatest strengths I can bring is to look at how things relate, leading back to student achievement. I did take a few minutes and look at your student achievement data, you know, at a very district level, and started to drill down, and I see that there's a lot of great things going on in your schools, and I think there's some areas that we can take to the next level. Mm-hmm. And I think connecting resources to student achievement will advance the district.
Okay, thank you. In what area do you feel that would be the most you would be the most challenged here in the school district of Indian River County as the interim superintendent?
I think some of the greatest challenges that a district like Indian River is facing is you've had a lot of change, you've had a lot of turnover, and I think sometimes you have to reestablish that consistency and that trust and build some continuity. I think student achievement is always something that is on the forefront. But again, getting everybody on the same page, one voice, one team, moving for one cause, and that's student achievement.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Wow, we're going through these really quickly, so that's good. I would like to ask, in your first 7 days, if you were selected today as our interim, in your first 7 days, what would be your 7-day goal with us?
Oh, certainly. And I did bring a handout. I know that you didn't ask for it, but I brought kind of a 90-day action plan. Yes, please. Thank you. Just to kind of give you a view of my thinking of how I would spend the first 90 days, but to answer your question specifically, okay. You asked for 7 days. This document is not, inclusive of everything. It was my first thoughts, my initial thoughts of how to hit the ground running, considering we are at the summer point where a lot of staff, they're on a summer vacation, but that's where a lot of work is done. So what I would say the first 7 days is I would want to get out. I would want to meet with each and every one of you individually. I would want to meet with every administrator. I would want to get out to the community leaders, and in 7 days just hit the ground running, visit every school. In that first week, meet all your administrators, meet as many of your staff members as you can, departments, so I can get a feel and start looking at reports in the evening hours.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you. So this is your 90-day plan, you said?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so at this time, our next topic that we'd like to dive into is instructional leadership, and the school board member that is going to be the leader of this area is Ms. Jackie Rosario.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for coming. I understand that you were on attending or planning to go on vacation, so I appreciate you taking the time to come in and rearrange your personal schedule, so I appreciate that. So with regard to strategic planning, you mentioned that strategic planning was something that was a strength for you. From your knowledge of our school district, what steps would you take using our strategic plan to improve overall student achievement?
Thank you for the question. I spent a lot of time looking at your strategic plan, the executive summary, and also drilling into your website that has scorecards. And I was very pleased to see that you have report cards. I called them scorecards, but report cards, I think, is how you have them titled, for the district and the school. And I think that is a great tool to communicate to the public and to keep an accountability of how you're measuring what you have in your strategic plan. So to answer your question very specifically, I would want to work with you as a board to sit down and look at the strategic plan. I think it's been in place a year or 2 years, so it's a really good time to really step back and say, okay, I realize this may have been a 5-year plan, but let's look at where we are. Does it still make sense? Is it still meeting the needs of the district? Are they the priorities you as a board collectively want to see moving forward? So there might be some changes or some updates that need to occur. Maybe not. It may be that we have the right items in it and we need to look at the data and really drill down into what those reports are saying, where we're meeting expectations, where we're not meeting expectations, and how far off the mark we are. And at that point in time, I think we go back and we strategize and look at those action strategies to say, gee, okay, we're missing something here. We haven't met the mark here, so we need to go back and really look at those strategies and put those specific actions into place and monitor that very, very carefully. So as the superintendent, I think that is the superintendent's job with the leadership team to really have those metrics on the forefront to go back in and say, okay, we're not meeting the mark here, we need to make adjustments. And give the board updates along the way as, you know, those kind of, all right, maybe we've been 3 months down the road, let's find out where we are. Not wait till the end of the year. You need to be monitoring those monthly or quarterly, whatever best fits that.
Thank you. Still on the topic of strategic planning, what is the ideal relationship between the strategic plan, instructional practice, student achievement, professional development, and school improvement plans? And what has been your role in strategic planning processes in your previous districts?
Okay, great, thank you. So with the role of the strategic plan, I think that is the overarching plan, and it should become the basis for departments and schools as they build their school improvement plans. So the school improvement plans are going to be very specific to the needs of the individual schools, and they're all not a one-size-fits-all, but they should be informed by the strategic plan of the school district. As far as professional development, that to me should be interwoven through every part of the school district. We need to grow our people, we need to build capacity, and that is every employee, teachers, leaders, our support staff, every single person that touches our district. And so I firmly believe that everyone's job is to raise student achievement and give students opportunities to excel. So if you walk into the food service arena in a school or at the district department, if you ask them what their job is, they should see it as, I make nutritious meals because my job is to increase student achievement in our district. Everything leads back to student achievement and students being number one priority. So that's why I think the strategic plan becomes the overarching, and everything else is feeding into that, with that being the driver. Now, you had a second part to your question. So all those school improvement plans, professional development, any of your plans should be connected, and let that be the overarching driver of it. The second part to it was, I think, what has been my experience.
Yes, ma'am.
In Lake County, we did not have a strategic plan when I arrived. We had goals. They had 5 different goals. It was not in a formalized strategic plan. We did a board retreat. At that time, I had 2 new board members that started the first day like I did, and we brought everybody together and we did a retreat over, and we met several times until we got the strategic plan in the form the way we wanted it to be. We next built the performance metrics and a way of reporting that. We called them scorecards, and every department had a scorecard. Those were published so that we could have those. Then the next phase was we went and did the strategic finance plan, and we built a process to link the finance part of it, because those are the resources that support the goals and make those happen, whether it was human resources or whether it was financial resources. And then we built tools to do program evaluation, to look at return on investment, so that if a program was costly, we knew why we were spending the money, and we knew what we were going to get as a return on that investment.
Thank you. And then the last question is about academic achievement. What strategies would you utilize to close the achievement gaps and raise achievement for our low-performing students?
That is a great question, and I think it's a very important one. I think that when you look at student achievement, you really need to look at the data and really break it down into every subgroup and really student by student. So when you look at your lowest performing student, you look at your lowest performing schools, you really need to see what are they doing in the classroom as far as instructional strategies, because the alignment is critical. So what we're asking students to do, are we measuring? Do we know when they've learned it? Do we know how we're measuring that? Do we know what it will look like when we see it? The resources we're used, are they aligned? I know time is pretty up.
Yes, but I believe maybe some of the questions you'll be able to address.
Sure.
Finish up your thoughts on that. Thank you. The next section that we'd like to dive into is business and finance, and Mrs. Tiffany Justice.
Good morning.
Good
Thank you
morning.
for joining us
Thank
today.
you.
You've spoken a little bit about finances and how important it is, and I'm one of those people that believes you get the money to spend the money well in your classrooms. That's our job. So I'd like to just jump right into some questions about the budget if possible. What level of involvement did you and will you have with the chief financial officer during the budget preparation process?
We work side by side. We're almost inseparable, to be honest, because one, as superintendent, I felt my name was on the line, and the board trusted my name to be on the line. And they trusted when I brought a recommended budget that I had dotted the i's and crossed the t's, and it was done, and it was balanced, and it was done with the highest integrity, with the best interest of our students. So first and foremost, I took that very personally. And so if I'm personally taking that to task, then I work hand in hand with the financial person. They know my philosophy. I look at every line item with them. I trust them to do their job, but I also know that I need to be well informed, and I should be able to answer any question about that budget without needing to call the finance officer to answer every question. They do know the answers, and they should know the answers, and I empower them. I'm not there to micromanage them, but I do want to make sure that I know every piece of it. So we walk hand in hand.
Great, thank you very much. What processes will you follow to communicate with individual board members to inform them about the details of the budget prior to the first and second public hearings on the budget?
In the past, what I have used, and it worked effectively for the board members that I was working with at the time, and I would certainly want to find out from you how you would like to do it. But what I usually would do around this time of the year, I did a budget orientation where I actually have a chart of the whole FEFP model, and I plug in the numbers for the district. So with the legislative session and the report we get from FSBA, I work with the finance officer, and we plug the actual numbers in for each of the cells of the FEFP model so that the community, as a board, you know exactly where our monies came from and where and how that all flows together. The second part to that is we build the budget. We look to the board to tell us what are your priorities this year. What are things that you want us to stop doing, and what are things you want us to start doing? That's part of that return on investment from your perspective. And we come to consensus on that, and then we build the budget based on the priorities and needs that you have brought to the table. So I like to meet with the board as a whole. I meet with individual board members. We do the public board orientation. And then I like to have different work sessions along the way. So as we're building the budget, we can bring it to you. You can say, we really like that, or wait a minute, that we're missing something here. So you're very informed along the way.
Thank you very much. What has been your experience in addressing fund balance issues when the third and fourth calculations of the FEFP resulted in a decrease in district revenues? What steps have you and will you take to protect the district from such revenue variations?
That's a very, very important question, and I have lived that. I lived that about the first 5 years of my superintendency. When I arrived in Lake County, that was in November. By May, I was tasked to cut about $13 million out of the budget. That was a very painful task, and we didn't do it alone. So the fund balance is the first thing. You know, I was raised that you first, when you get your money in your paycheck, the first thing you do is invest in yourself, and that's called a savings account. That's the way I look at the fund balance. The first thing we do is set up that fund balance, and that is non-negotiable. And you protect that. In Lake, we had a board policy that it could not drop below. So I was trained, this is it, this is where you start, and then you build your budget from that part. We did not dip into that. We did not touch that unless there was a crisis of such a horrific manner, and that would take board action, and we actually had a supermajority vote to really touch that. So I say that first and foremost, that's how I've learned to operate, and I have that level of protection. To go back to the budget, I have looked at your budget, and I see that right now you're projected to have a 5.9% fund balance. I would say I would not want it to ever go lower than that. In fact, I try to build it a little higher than that. Just as a safety net, and then we work from there. But you want all your resources in the classroom with teachers, with students, and being very deliberate about that as we build the budget. But I start with the fund balance and work backwards.
Okay, thank you very much. And the last question is a scenario I'm going to just read to you, and then if you could give us your thoughts.
Sure.
So during executive sessions related to collective bargaining, the board discussion clearly indicates that the board wishes to present or accept a salary settlement that will either require that the board spend funds from the current year fund balance to pay for salary or health insurance cost increases, or is based on the assumption that the district will receive FEFP funding increases that are not accompanied by spending increases required by the legislature that are more than 3% of the current year's funding. What has been the history of the legislative appropriations for the past 3 years with regard to providing this level of unencumbered funding increases? Will you accept the emerging position of the board? If you will not, how will you lead the board to a different position that preserves the fiscal stability of the school district?
That's a great scenario and a very complex one. And I will first and foremost tell you that I probably don't have the perfect answer for that, but I will give you my thoughts on that situation because those are real scenarios facing districts. First of all, I try to look at the past trends of your district with your FEFP. And I think that we can pull up very easily the last 5 years to look at your increases that you come in. I suspect because you don't have high growth in this area, you're just getting the maintenance FEFP. So it's not like you're going to get a landfall of money coming in revenues. So I'm very cautious about spending money that you don't have coming in or confirm that you have coming in. So I think I would go very cautiously in this scenario. Compensating our employees is very important. You want to be able to attract and retain and have competitive salaries. So I know the priority with that. So I'd want to work with the board, and let's really look at the data. Let's look at what the trend data is saying and see what is the best solution in a situation that doesn't have a very good answer to do. It'd be very easy if we could just say, yes, let's just do this and hope for the best, and here it comes. But I think that's very risky and very chancy. Would I follow the direction of the board? You bet I will follow the direction of the board if that's the vote of the majority of the board, and gladly carry out your wishes. But getting there, I will spend every minute I can making sure that you have all the information of the pros and the cons so that we make the best decision that protects the district.
Thank you very much for your time.
So we've been throwing questions at you. If you need to take a drink
I'm
right
good.
now.
I'm actually good.
Take a breath
Yeah,
here.
Thank you. Thank
Okay.
you for that.
So this section that we like to understand is board, staff, and community relations. And I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Barenborg to ask you the series of questions in this section.
Good morning.
Good
You
morning.
touched on this a little bit, but we want more in-depth information about this. How would you build and facilitate a collaborative and trusting relationship with and among board members, school and district leaders, teachers, support staff, representative organizations, parents, students, business leaders, and the community as a whole? And give examples of your prior experience and success with building and facilitating relationships with those above groups.
Sure, thank you for that question. I think trust is built through consistency over time. People need to see who you are, and they need to know that they can trust that that's who you will always be when you interact with them. And the way to do that is they need to get to know you. They need to see you. So that's why it's critically important to spend time with people. So when you talk about the employees, I firmly believe in what I did do when I became superintendent in Lake County. So this is what I believe should occur, and this is what I have done in the past, is I get out and about, and I meet with every department, I meet with every school, I visit classrooms. At the beginning of the year, I try to get to every school the first week of school, if not on the first 2 days. I want to meet all new teachers into the district. If we have a new teacher orientation, I am there. I am present. They get to see me. They get to talk to me. I like to spend time in the departments. Food service, transportation. I meet every food service in the cafeteria. I go in and I meet them. I talk with them. I visit them. I shadowed in the maintenance department. I went out and changed air conditioning filters over the summer to shadow what the maintenance people did, because I wanted to see what their working day was like, what their conditions were. And we at random picked somebody, so that's why it was. We had a bus driver training. I was there. I was present, get to see them. So that's how I handled the employees. They needed to get to know me. I needed to get to know them and have that one-on-one type of conversation. With the board, with regards to the school board, as I shared, I had new board members. We did retreats. That was what they liked the most, and it worked well. We talked about priorities. We established communication protocols. We did roles and responsibilities, how we work together. So we established the way we did work in Lake. It would be the way we do work here in Indian River. And every board member needed to be heard, establish their communication style and priorities, and we came to consensus. Then I like to individually meet with board members so that you have an understanding of all your questions that you have, they can be answered. If you need additional information, we get that for you. The leadership team at the district office, they are here to support you. You make very important district decisions on behalf of this district, and we need to be here to support you. I recognize that they work for the superintendent, but we all are one leadership team. And so if you have a question and you call the chief finance officer, they are to answer your question. They also make sure that they give the information to every board member, because if you have the question, I'll guarantee you somebody else does too. So they make sure that all board members have the same information, even though one person answered it. They make sure I know exactly what information was given, so that we're on one team, one voice to this district as a whole. So that's how I like to work with the school board. We learn together and we lead together.
Okay. One that you didn't mention, representative organizations. Can you tell
Oh,
us
yes,
about that?
thank you. Thank you for bringing that back up. I like to go out to the community organizations. So I usually started with the governmental entities like the mayors, the Chamber of Commerce, president or chair or director. If you have a foundation, I like to meet with the executive director of your educational foundation. If you have civic organizations, I will go to their meetings if it's the Kiwanians, the Alliance Club. If you have other civic organizations that are specific, really get out into the community. And if I have the opportunity to speak to the group, I will use that opportunity to share the good news about Indian River County and our strategic plan and our board priorities, and highlight the good news here. And you have great news. It's on your website. I've read it, and you have a finalist for Teacher of the Year. Those are great things. They need to be communicated to the community.
Okay. Next question. How could our district move towards more transparency? What steps and communication processes would you suggest? And please give examples of how you have created a more transparent and trusted district.
Transparency is one that I don't think you can get enough of. You continue to work on it all the time, because if someone doesn't have the information, they will view it as not being transparent. And so you just keep working and working and working at it. That's a never-ending job, because it's so important. So how do you go about being transparent? I think your website is excellent. You have a lot of information. It's very easy to use. You have a button there where people can submit ideas for cost savings. I think that's very important. The important thing, though, is that it's there. Do people use it? If they use it, how do you communicate that you've seen it? That's very important. So I think periodically you need to talk about the input that you get from the community, so that they can be validated and recognize that you hear them and you see them. In Lake, when we started the strategic finance planning process, we used a media, it was called Mind Mixer. And we actually put it out there, and it was kind of like a chat room, if you will, but not a Facebook kind of thing, but where members of the community, we would pose questions out there that we wanted input, and we allowed them to give input, and we gathered that, and then at a public meeting, we talked about those ideas, and we shared, if it was something that was, this just did not fit or wouldn't work, we honored the comment, and we had used it as an opportunity to explain why this didn't quite fit, or maybe we customized it or adjusted, but you honored the transparency. I think with the budget process, you get that out, you make sure that it's in an understandable format. You do that through visiting with your local organizations, and you're very upfront about it. If you make a mistake, you own it right up front. Learned that many times over. You own it, you take the criticism on it, you apologize, and you fix it right away, and you move forward.
Thank you.
Great. So this is our last of our major topics is performance accountability, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Mara Schiff.
Good morning,
Good morning.
again. So you may be aware that we've been under a desegregation order for a number of years. Could you talk a bit about your experience addressing specifically racial equity issues, desegregation orders, if you've had experience with that and how you fostered both academic achievement and community relationships around equity and desegregation in a district.
Sure, thank you for that opportunity to answer that. When I was in Orange County, they were under a desegregation order and we're seeking unitary status. And so while I was on cabinet, I was not an associate superintendent. So my direct link to that wasn't as if a superintendent. But I do know that in all areas, I was over the technical colleges at that time. We were very sensitive to looking at enrollment, recruitment and retention of our students, since that was a college kind of setting. We looked at our instructor recruitment and retention. So really looking at the data and looking at your strategies and your outreach with that. So important to look at the data and monitor that and have very deliberate outreach so that people were invited and it was a environment that fostered diversity. I think that's very important, that the environment is conducive to diversification, that people feel welcome to apply and they want to be there. As a superintendent in Lake County, I saw that the academic achievement gap was rather large, and we really went in and looked at diversity training. We looked at diversity as some programmatic offerings. We looked at access to upper level courses like AP, your honors. We looked at our data to see where are our students. We looked at our gifted data. We looked at our suspension rates. We looked at all that data to see where were we on track and where were we missing the mark. I implemented and got to full district implementation of a program called AVID. I didn't see on your district whether you have AVID or not, so I can't answer that question. But I believe AVID opened a lot of doors for students that normally did not have the opportunity or the encouragement to strive for those upper level courses. We had mentors. We did the program with Fidelity. It is not a cheap program, so I'm not going to say it's an easy program to implement, but I do believe it gave access. We were on honor roll with College Board for our AP participation and passage rate, and we're closing the achievement gap with our minority students. So that was the greatest achievement that I saw on the academic achievement side of the house. But I think your programmatic offers, your access to things, and you have to be very deliberate about providing that access, and it's providing support for the student. AVID did that, taught them those types of skill sets. So those are just a few ideas, but I think the data really will drive where your areas of greatest need are, and then you put the strategies in place to do that. And it's training people to have a different way of looking at things, and I think you have to be out and about. As far as the community is concerned, I reached out to a lot of the organizations that worked with our underrepresented populations. I visited the faith-based churches and got out into the community and went to the churches and worked with the ministerial associations that supported children, and they had programs to help support. They want their children and their communities to have the greatest opportunities, as do I. So we tried to partner with the faith-based ministerial associations.
Thank you. I have so many follow-up questions
Sure,
that
sure,
I can't ask right now.
sure.
But in the interest of time, you've already talked a lot about the budget and the strategic planning and how you tie that together. Can you talk a bit, describe your leadership style and specifically your approach to holding others accountable?
Sure, thank you. In the 90-day plan, I do have a page that is the superintendent's guiding principles, and when I started in Lake, I had 12 of them at the beginning, and I realized that people just didn't wrap their arms around 12, and so towards the end of my career, these are the three that best describe not only how I expect my way of work, but I expected everybody else to work, and we always went back to these guiding principles of integrity. We lead as a team. We're all on the same team. And we talk about those. So when I had my leadership meeting at the beginning of the year over the summer, we talked about what does this mean? What does this look like if I'm a principal? What does this look like if I'm an assistant principal? What does it look like if I am a bus driver? We talked about all of that so that people knew the expectations and the way we work. What you see, again, is what you will always see from me. I don't do well with games, and so I don't intend to play games, so I expect people not to play games with me, and if we do, we cut right to the chase and get to the bottom line, because every minute that we defer to something else that's not on track of raising student achievement, we've lost that minute in time forever. So I'm very conscious about staying on point with children, and I use these guiding principles to help drive that. And they start with me. So one is role modeling, and two is expectation. And frankly, if you talked about accountability, we have conversations about expectations, and I will help support them get on point.
What steps would you take to ensure, as interim superintendent, a very successful opening to our next school year?
Sure, that's so important. The first day for teachers, with principals welcoming teachers, is critical, and the first day we welcome students. I think the whole summer is focused on, I backwards map. Here's the first day, what has to be done 5 days out, 10 days out, a month out, and we look at that, and frankly, tomorrow we need to be right on point thinking about the summer and already planning on that. The first thing, as soon as student achievement data comes in, we need to be on that, disaggregating that, working with the principals, working with the departments so that we have the adjustments made and the resources and supports that are needed to make those adjustments so that those are ready for the first day of school. Working with transportation, with bus routes to make sure those are updated and adjusted and that those are communicated to parents. Food service, the same thing. I think you work with all the departments and leave no stone unturned so that every detail is planned so that when we are a week out, we're just making sure that the button's ready to be pushed and everything is going in place. I communicate with the schools departments.
Thank you.
Time is here.
So we're in our last portion of the interview. So at this time, what we'd like to do is, I prefer us to follow up the 10-minute questions, and then I'll ask her
However you
to
wanna do it.
wrap it up. So at this time, we have about 10 minutes for board members if you had any follow-up. So what that really means is we have about 2 minutes per board member. I'm going to start with our Vice Chair, Ms. Tiffany Justice.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Ork. In speaking with some of your references, one of the things that was mentioned several times was the transition plan that you had created as the new superintendent took office. As an interim superintendent, really, you're readying the district for a permanent leader. So can you just speak quickly, 2 minutes, can you tell us in 2 minutes how you created a transition plan that was supportive of the operations of the district and then allowed that leader to be successful on day one?
Sure. We had some overlap with the new superintendent, and that was by design. I actually had that when I became superintendent, since we were changing from an elected superintendent, and I was the first appointed in like 35 years. So I had some transition time with it. So basically, when the new superintendent was going through the process and they knew that they had identified, we made sure, we shored up every detail in the district. We got everything on an even plane. We had briefings so that each department could have a briefing. Okay, this is what we're doing. These are our priorities. This is how we're doing. So the new superintendent, when she came on board, she was able to meet with the department, had everything ready to go, move. She was able to do her analysis and get her 90-day plan running. She actually came in on day one, had the 90-day plan. We were able to help facilitate that. And so there was a transition, an overlap there where she was able to do the leading and learning type of learning walks. get the briefings. We had all the data. We had the strategic finance plan. We had the strategic plan. We had everything lined up. I was able to sit and work with her, saying, here are the challenges going into the next year that we just quite, didn't get completed by my time leaving, that you will be facing coming in. Here's my expert status report on that. And so we did that transition that way.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Schiff?
Tell me about a specific time of one of your greatest challenges as superintendent and how you addressed and resolved that.
Oh, I have a number of those. I can tell you. Well, the obvious one we've talked about was the finance. I would tell you one of the greatest challenges that really comes to mind is we were a high growth district, and because of the building and construction and the new schools that had come online, while the $2 million money was still $2 million, the debt ratio was built on that, and when it dropped to 1.5, that became a real challenge. And even though we never really leveled off in enrollment, we still continued to grow, but then when it came back 5 years later, the growth was again off the charts, and we did not have the finances to roll schools out in a timely manner. So that meant we had to do attendance boundary changes. And those are never popular, they're never fun, and there is never an answer that makes 100% of our parents happy. And so walking through that process to change enrollment boundaries for schools to make sure that every seat was utilized throughout the district was challenging, and we did it through a lot of meetings. We put a committee together that had the stakeholders that were affected by the attendance boundaries in the schools. They came together, and our growth planning department actually worked with them. They worked with the data. They put several scenarios together and brought recommendations. I met with them numerous times to say, okay, let's look at this. And then they would bring a recommendation to the board so that we had the best voices, the best thinking, and the people that had the greatest impact were part of the decision or part of the recommendation.
Thank you.
You're
Um, What is your view on school safety and our relationship with local law enforcement agencies, along with, if any, new laws that have been put in place with regard to school safety?
Well, I think safety, school safety, one, has always been important. The children come, the parents trust us, and it is a part of learning and academic achievement that they need to be in a safe, conducive environment that is supportive, that they feel safe in a lot of different ways, not just the obvious. Safety from threats, that type of thing. So I think there's programs you can do to academically teach students about anti-bullying and positive behavior support types of things. Those are from the academic side of the house. But with regards to school safety, I know that the new laws that have come in, I have tried to follow those, although not intricately involved, not being in a school system. But I think your partnership with all your law enforcement agencies, whether it's the sheriff or your local police departments, I think those need to be tighter than they ever have been before. I was very used to that. The sheriff and I met quite frequently. We had resource officers in the schools. I worked with the local municipalities. So I think they're part of your leadership team now. They need to know exactly our building layouts. We need to get expertise from them on measures and ways we can shore up our facilities to be even safer. I think we work with them as well to make sure that whatever we do is conducive to the learning environment and does not have the adverse effect, because I think you can have drills that that are quite frightening for children too, that I think there's a balance there, that you don't want to create a different situation by trying to do something else. So I think those are hand in hand.
Thank you.
Okay. Please provide us with a profile or the demographics of the districts that you have specifically led.
The profiles of the districts I've led, at Lake County would be the primary one. We had 42,000 students in the districts that you're talking about the demographics of the profile.
Mostly diversity.
Oh,
of your
diversity.
students.
Lake County, we had about a 63% free and reduced lunch population. We were about 20% Hispanic. I think we were 16% African American. We had less than a percent Asian population. 2 races or more was probably about 4%. And these are estimates based, because it's been 2 years since I worked with that data. Students with disabilities probably was about 18 or 20%. ELL population, that one I'm not as exact on. I'm not recalling that one right off the top of that. That was a growing population, the ELL population. Orange County was highly diverse. They had about 200,000 students, I think. I oversaw the technical colleges, so I had about 25,000 students in the technical colleges at that time. Their diversity probably was about 50% minority, large Hispanic population. We had advisory council, a superintendent advisory council that was a Hispanic council. He had also had one for an African American council with that we from time to time would present and communicate and work on different strategies or programs with that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I was able to speak with some of your references, and,
Sure.
and you had wonderful references. And I spoke the most with Miss Cindy McLeod, your CFO.
Oh, yes.
And she had mentioned that when you were the superintendent, and it was a very interesting idea, to help board members prepare for the meetings, you had assigned administrators who were board buddies. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. We did that my whole time there. Every board member had a board buddy, and it was one of the executive leadership staff members. So each of the chiefs had a board member, and we rotated. So that you got one to know each of them, and they got to know each of you. But they would call a week out after we prepared the board packet and it went in your hands. They would follow up with their board buddy, and they would ask, do you have any specific questions? Do you need any additional information? What can I do to help you so that you are the most prepared with the most information that will allow you, when you get to the board table, to be the most prepared for you to make the important decisions that are going to come before you. They also served as a contact that if something came up, maybe a member of the community had a question, you could call and say, hey, Ms. So-and-so or this person, they asked this question. This is news to me. Do you have any information? They would say, I haven't heard about that, but let me get the information for you. So you weren't having to call all over the place trying to get an answer to a question. We found it to be time saving on your part. The board members seemed to like it. Sometimes they would ask for the same person. Again, could that person be my board buddy and stay my board buddy? And that was fine too. But then they made sure every board member got the same information.
Okay. So at this time, what we'd like to do is just wrap it up and ask you, do you have any closing comments that you would like to share with us? And then in that, is there anything that us as a board that we, this is an aggressive search, so is there anything in the board and that the board members might not know about that could come up later if we were to offer you the position that? So I'm going to allow you to wrap up and just give us your final thoughts and anything
Sure.
that we missed.
Sure. Well, I'm sure a lot of people say, well, gee, Susan, you retired 2 years ago. Why are you sitting here? And I know you started to ask that question, and I sort of answered it, but I know time got it. One, at the end of drop, You leave and you think you're ready to retire, but you realize that you still have a lot to give. And I have found that I still stay very actively involved in public education, and I'm very passionate about public education for all our children. And I always focused on all means all. And every student, every day, every minute gets a viable curriculum and an instruction that is diverse and differentiated for them, that they should have equal opportunities and there's not a minute to waste. So I operate from that. And I find myself, while I stay very busy, I find myself always headed back to education. Indian River is a beautiful community. It's very similar to the one that I now live in. I'm in Palm Coast. Palm Coast may be a little bit smaller, but I find myself constantly watching what the programs are in the schools where I live. I follow Lake County, and again, you have so many wonderful things going on here. And I feel that I still have a lot to contribute. And if I can help a school district, and I've been working I was doing some independent consulting in another school district, and I have found how much I have missed being at a district. I'm a very collaborative leader. That is my style. And so I love to work together to make things better, and make things better for a community, make things better for schools, and ultimately children. So that's where my passion is, and again, I realize that I'm not ready to be full-time retired. So I am here offering to help, and I don't know how to do anything halfway. I am sort of a perfectionist. That can be a good thing and that can be a bad thing, I know. But I do like things to be right, and I like them to be right the first time, and I am willing to be the one that is doing the hardest work and heaviest lift along with everybody else, and I won't ask anybody to do anything that I won't do myself. So again, I want things to be right for the community and for the children in the school district. So if I can help anyone in any way, I'm ready to do that. Is there anything that would come up down the road? Not that I'm aware of. I don't like surprises. I don't like to give you surprises, so I work really hard to make sure that we're planned and prepared, and that those things that we can't control, we deal with, and we're ready to deal with them. So unless there's a surprise out there, I'm not aware of it. As far as my ability to be responsive on a dime in a quick turnaround, I can do that. My husband and I downsized. We live in a condominium now. It's just he and I can lock and go, and we do frequently do that. This has been a family decision for me to be here. My husband does spend the summers in our cabin in Idaho doing work, so he's going to be well entertained. So I have 24/7 to devote to you. I recognize that this is short term, but every minute counts, so I understand while it's short term, for me, I will approach it as if it's long term. I don't know how to do it any other way. I am ready to be turn around and be here when you need me to be here. I do have one meeting obligation to finish a project that involves a meeting with the chancellor on next Tuesday. I would like to honor that, to close that out, but other than that, my time is your time.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And we thank you for coming here on a short notice, and I know that you had to rearrange your schedule. And this evening, or this afternoon, we, as a board, we're going to be making this decision. And either way, you'll be hearing back from us, Miss Smith, or Andrea. And, but we really appreciate you coming in.
Certainly,
And
thank you.
we appreciate the time that you've given us and the amount of years that you've served the state and serving the students. Before we go, are there any questions that you have for us that Andrea could follow up with you, or?
I've been spending a lot of time, and I did watch a lot of your board meetings from, I just at random picked some to look at the kind of topics, and I see your passion and the excellence that you have created in the board expectation and how you want to move forward. And I just commend you for that. And I really don't have any other questions other than, at the time, I would like to chat with each one of you individually and get your priorities. So we'll move forward.
All right, well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to meet everybody. Thank you so much.
Um, I want to say welcome.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
for being here. I'd like to introduce some of the people that are in the room. We have our Vice Chair, Ms. Tiffany Justice, Board Member Dr. Mara Schiff. We have Mrs. Jackie Rosario, Mrs. Terry Barenborg,
Good morning.
our Board Attorney, Mrs. Diagresta, and of course, you're familiar with our Superintendent Consultant from Florida School Board Association, Bill Vogel, Dr. Bill Vogel. We have our HR Consultant from Florida School Board Association, John Riker. Also in our audience, we have our Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction, Pam Dampier. And next to Pam, we have Heather Clark. She is our Director of ESE. And back in the back over here, we have our Executive Director of Human Resources, Dr. Edwina Sue. And we have newly to the district, Michelle Oakes is with she does our negotiations in HR and human resource consultant or specialist. Over here, we have Ms. Peggy Poisel. Peggy has been with us for many years, and she is the superintendent executive assistant. And then we have Kristen Maddox, our Public Information Officer, and we're not supposed to have favorites, so I'm not gonna say
Oh.
that. But we have
Board
Miss
secretary.
Nancy Esplin, who is our board executive assistant.
That's appropriate.
So at this time, I just want to thank you for adjusting your time schedule to be here today on such a short notice and your willingness to work with Indian River School District on an interim basis. We take this responsibility very serious and look forward to working collaboratively with the person that we choose to fill this important position. We're on a tight time schedule today, so we will only, we'll have 1 hour for this interview. We may not get to all our questions, but today, we are committed to getting through as many as we can, obviously. You will have about 7 minutes in each area of leadership that we will have each board member, we've divided it up with each board member, and Mrs. Diagresta will help keep us on our time. So at 6 minutes, you'll hear a beep, and so that means we have 60 seconds to wrap it up. Today, we are going to be interviewing 3 candidates. Obviously, you are our second choice that we've decided on Friday to bring you in, and by this afternoon, we hope to have a decision as a board. So anyways, let's go ahead and get started. So to kind of just introduce us to who you are, if you'll just tell us a little about your educational and work experience and why you would like to be our interim superintendent.
Great question. I would be honored to do so. As far as my educational background, I received a Bachelor of Arts degree in education from the University of Florida and a master's degree from Florida Atlantic University, and I believe that information is within my resume. Upon graduation from University of Florida, I began my work in St. Lucie County, Florida, as an exceptional education teacher. I was one of 4 teachers at a 4-room schoolhouse at St. Lucie School that is now a museum within St. Lucie County. It was an interesting experience, and as we began including students in the schools, the teachers were included as well. From that experience, I then spent years as a teacher, as an administrator, also worked for the Florida Diagnostic Learning Resources System, Fiddlers, Galaxy, which serves your district as well. And from there moved into administration and into the district office, where I served as an assistant superintendent, as well as deputy superintendent and the superintendent. The superintendency began as an interim position, as this one has. I was serving as the deputy, and our superintendent retired, and that was Mike Lannon. And at that time, I was asked to serve as the interim while the board sent out a search and then attempted to fill the vacancy. We had a great start to the 2013-14 school year, where we conducted a motivating kickoff where we looked at our strategic plan, our goals and objectives, and actually concluded that day with a rally that all schools were able to participate in, no matter whether they were present or not. I was personally at Dan McCarty Middle School in the gym, and it was televised to all schools so that if individuals could not be present at that location, it was live streamed to those individuals. Following that, we were fortunate in that we had had some contentious conversation with our negotiating teams, and everything fell into place about that time as well, and we settled our contracts. And so with those two wins, I believe that the board felt as if they should give me another look at maybe stepping up to superintendency, a position I had not applied for. I was in the drop program and knew that I would be retiring July 1 of 2015. And so at that time, there was an understanding it would be a 2-year position. And so we would move as swiftly as possible to accomplish as many goals as possible through the strategic plan, as well as transition smoothly to the new superintendent upon appointment.
Well, thank you. Could you please share with us some of your greatest strengths?
I think one of my greatest strengths is communication, and that is one of the reasons I have applied for this position. I would like to work with the board, your total school community, to bring about trust and a smooth transition during this period of time where you are moving from your current superintendent into a permanent superintendent at the conclusion of your search. In years past, it has been my leadership style to communicate frequently with board members as well as senior staff and others as appropriate. For example, if we are bringing forward a key position for board authorization, and even if it's an HR position, let's say it is a principal, that discussion occurs with each and every individual board member. Some of you like lots of information, others just want the data, and then we move on. But with your learning styles and your leadership styles, we would find a perfect match, I would hope, so that we could continue to communicate and share that information with the community. So communication is critical, and as James Comer has said, no significant learning occurs without a significant relationship. And I know that was written with teachers in mind, so that they would provide high-quality work as well as support for students, but I firmly believe that applies to all areas of life.
Okay, thank you. And what specific areas in doing your research about Indian River County do you feel that you can make the greatest impact, positive impact, on our school district when you're serving as our interim superintendent?
With a limited period of time, approximately 6 months, maximum a year from what has been advertised, I think we need to prioritize what is most important, have individual conversations with board members as well as senior staff, take a very close look at your strategic plan to determine what could be accomplished. I mentioned that I felt a strength was communication, and I think we need to maintain the high standards within Indian River County. However, if there are some areas that need attention, we will want to begin collaborating and working towards a common goal in those areas as well. We will not want to wait until you have a full-time person on board. We will position ourselves so that that person can transition smoothly and hopefully hit the road running when they arrive.
What do you find that might be, we'll wrap this up, what do you find that might be some of your most challenges as the interim?
The timeline,
Okay.
because we've got to be very succinct. We've got to know where we're going from day one so that there is an action plan as to what the board, my boss, would expect. So it would be critical to understand your priorities. And I think some of those have been evident in the meetings that I've watched online, such as your budget workshop. So we would take that information and then formulate a plan to work through the next 6 to 12 months.
Okay, well, thank you. The next area that we'd like to dive into is instructional leadership. At this time, I'm going to turn the floor over to Mrs. Rosario, to ask the questions in this area.
Thank you, ma'am. Hi, good morning.
Morning.
From your knowledge of Indian River County schools, what steps would you take in using our strategic plan to improve student achievement?
I think one of the first things we need to do is to analyze the data, and I'm sure your staff has done so. You would need to bring me up to speed. I have the information from the past year, but of course, we're at the conclusion of this current school year. And so as the data arrives, review the graduation rates, see in the areas of the 5 objectives on your strategic plan. For example, I know last year you had a 14% decrease in student referrals. Based on, a lot of it was based upon, in your belief, on the training for positive behavioral intervention. Has that remained static? Have you improved in that area so that we can use the data to drive our movement in that area? You have well-qualified district staff who guide your schools, and hopefully we can work collaboratively to find out where we need to go. And let's see if there's any low-hanging fruit that would make a huge difference, let's say to improve the graduation rates or some other specific area within the district, and then begin working on longer-range plans that would, of course, not be accomplished within 6 to 12 months, but we start the process of working towards longer-range goals.
Thank you. And what is the ideal relationship, in your opinion, between the strategic plan, instructional practice, student achievement, professional development, and school improvement plans?
Oh my gosh, they ought to all be interconnected. When one is out of sync, kind of like a puzzle when you put it together, you need to find a way to move that back into place so that you are working in tandem with all those areas, because that just strengthens your efforts. And it also creates a clear objective for your students, your total school community, really, so that they know where you are going, we are going as a district, and how we will get there in those core areas.
Thank you. And moving into the area of academic achievement, what strategies would you utilize to close the achievement gaps and raise academic achievement in our low-performing students?
I would need to become familiar with the strategies you are currently utilizing. There is lots of information, a plethora of information on your website, but all of those strategies, of course, are not in place. What are we doing for select groups of students? Are they exceptional ed? Are they simply low performing but have the ability to perform at a higher level? Do we need to simply motivate them? And how do we provide mentors who will monitor them, hold them accountable, and then celebrate their small successes as they reach an ultimate goal? But I really believe that education would be critical for me as we look at that. I've taken a look at your schools and your school grades and the data over about 4 years. So I know that some of your schools as a whole could possibly shore up that lower performing population, or maybe the upper end. Is there a student who has greater ability who just needs a little bit of encouragement to increase their performance levels as well, not just looking at the lowest quartile, but that was the question you asked, was about the lowest functioning students.
Yes, ma'am. Do we have time for follow-up? Or do we just go on and come back to a follow-up? Yeah, okay. As a follow-up, what has been your, going back to the strategic plan, what has been your input into the strategic plan that you had in St. Lucie County and your experience with that? How can you bring your experience into Indian River County?
I will cite an example as superintendent. When I was placed in the position and approved by the board, one of the first meetings that we conducted was jointly with Florida School Board Association. There was a representative from Okeechobee who came to facilitate a meeting of the 5 board members and myself in the morning session so that we clearly understood our individual goals and the priorities that they had during the time period that I would be serving the district. The afternoon session, we brought in district executive staff and we addressed the strategic plan. We went step by step, area by area, to determine whether or not those were still priorities for the district for the 13 through 15 school years, and then began our work as an executive committee, allocating responsibilities, developing action plans to meet those particular goals. In St. Lucie County, it was a little bit easier to look at a strategic plan because I was a part of the process of the development. Here, I will need to acquire some background information. I view myself as a rapid study, and I will certainly listen and learn during the initial days.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you. All right, we are moving really rapidly, so if you need to take a drink and a breath, this is the time to take it.
Okay.
So the next section that we're going to dive into is business and finance, and we have our vice chair, Ms. Tiffany Justice. I'm going to turn the floor over to her.
Good morning. The first question will be about the general budget process. What level of involvement did you and will you have with the chief financial officer during the budget preparation process?
As has been historically the case in the district where I have worked, the chief financial officer and the finance staff have been very heavily involved in the development process, communicating with the superintendent regarding the developments, and we always met prior to a board meeting to review data, to make certain that the facts and figures were well understood by the superintendent as well as could be conveyed to others. Mr. Bargeron, who has served as a consultant for you all over the last couple of months, and I know that he was also working with your Director of Finance this Saturday, and the two of us have spoken over the weekend because I looked at your budget workshop, I viewed that online, and then had a few questions, so I reached out to Mr. Bargeron to ask a few questions. And he seems to be aligned with much of the work that we did in St. Lucie County, where he is working with the Director of Finance, pulling figures, attempting to look at possibly new perspectives, making sure that amendments are addressed as appropriate, not only in the general fund, but all fund areas, so that funds are available to move forward for the upcoming school year. During our conversation and viewing the workshop itself, I know that the amendments did not appear to be ongoing, so that may be a new strategy to be used throughout the district if that is something that we deem appropriate for Indian River County. The general funds, of course, we want to know what is happening on a daily basis, the reality of the funds that are expended each and every day. What's a recurring expense so that that can be budgeted, and then you work from there to move forward with additional funds and functions to make the total budget work for the needs of the district. When it comes to general budget as well as the other budgets, I feel that you would want to align your strategic plan to the budget as well. Are the priorities outlined within your budget? Are funds available for where you would like them to be devoted in order to bring about a positive change in those areas that you and the district have designed as the priorities for Indian River County?
Thank you very much. My second question will be, what processes will you follow to communicate with individual board members to inform them about the details of the budget prior to the first and second public hearings on the budget?
I think I need to return to the response that I gave a few minutes ago, in that I would meet with each and every one individually. Also, I see that you have some scheduled meetings on a regular basis. on the Tuesday afternoon, I believe. And those meetings, if we have an agenda item where all 5 could be in agreement because it's a publicized meeting, and that agenda could come forward. But specific questions that would come from board members, I have an open door policy. I would hope that you would call or come by so that we could communicate. And if I did not have immediate time, we would schedule time to discuss your concerns relative to the budget or any other area. I think it's important to open communication. There shouldn't be any surprises, if at all possible, when we approach a board meeting. You ought to be armed with as much data as possible going into meetings, as well as when you're out in the community. Our community members ask questions and they catch us off guard from time to time. There's a question that we would want board members as well as district staff to be prepared to respond to our public. We are meeting their students' needs. They are a part of the total effort to bring about improvement in student achievement and the professional growth and development of students, staff, entire Indian River staff. So I think it's critical to communicate, and one-on-one is not a problem for me. I know it takes many hours, especially at the onset, until we would become familiar with one another. I think that investment goes a long way over time.
Thank you very much. My third question will be about revenue variations. What has been your experience in addressing fund balance issues when the third and fourth calculations of the FEFP resulted in a decrease in district revenue? What steps have you and will you take to protect the district from such revenue variations?
I have to say, Mr. Bargeron is in my head right now, and he's going to say, do not panic until the final budget is appropriated. Look at the data that comes in. Make certain that we have systems in place that can tell us where the funds are being appropriated. If we can and are able to make an amendment early on in the year so that we can address that particular deficiency, then we would want to do that. We would want to consider each and every one of our options. Is there something we can do without impacting the students and the school by having reductions in their programs and their finances? Is there, thank you. Is there a means by which we can be creative in our funding and our allocation to address those shortcomings, especially during the third and fourth?
I have one last question as a scenario, and I'm going to say it quickly so that we can get an answer, hopefully a little bit. During executive sessions related to collective bargaining, the board discussion clearly indicates that the board wishes to present or accept a salary settlement that will either require the board spend funds from the current year fund balance to pay for salary or health insurance cost increases, or is based on the assumption that the district will receive FEFP funding increases that are not accompanied by spending increases required by the legislature that are more than 3% of the current year's funding. What has been the history of legislative appropriations for the past 3 years with regard to providing this level of unencumbered funding increases? Will you accept the emerging position of the board? If you will not, how would you lead the board to a different position that preserves the fiscal stability of the school district?
I believe my initial response would be to support the board. However, we have got to discuss the advantages and disadvantages of that option so that we are very clear on what would occur. Does something else have to be reduced if we are then to take the position of increased salaries and fringe benefits?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, at this time, I'm going to turn the floor over to Mrs. Berenborg, and she is going to ask you questions relating to board, staff, and community relationships.
Hello, Mrs. Yost.
Good morning.
How would you build and facilitate a collaborative and trusting relationship with and among board members, school district leaders, teachers, support staff, representative organizations, parents, students, business leaders, and the community as a whole? Give examples of your prior experience and success with building and facilitating relationships with the above groups.
We'll start with the board, and I will reiterate the fact that I believe that especially at the onset of an appointment, it would be important for us to get to know one another as well as possible so that we have an understanding of your leadership and learning style as well as mine. We need to remain in constant contact with one another. With the other school community representatives, there would also be an open door policy to the best of our ability, as long as it does not hinder the day-to-day operations of the district. Working with teachers, I would hope to be able to visit schools, get to know as many of our faculty and staff members as possible, as well as the administrators. The administrators themselves, I know, report to Ms. Dampier, and through that process, and the director of elementary as well as secondary schools, they have a close relationship, and I hope that they are addressing strategies for improvement at their school as well as personal growth and development on the administrator's part. I'd like to be involved. I feel as if that was an area of strength for me as I was a principal as well as a district supervisor of administrators within our schools and at the district level. And if time avails, I would like to visit and be involved to the best of my ability. Working with parents, I believe that we need to respond as rapidly as possible. When I say we are a team. If a parent has called the district office and can be assigned to a district representative who could address their concern and resolve it in a positive way, or at least through a clear understanding of how their response indicates board policy and action that must be taken regarding their question and their concern, I would hope that that would happen. There are going to be times when parents will want to speak to the superintendent and only the superintendent. That is understood. But I would hope so that we could address parent concerns or community concerns rapidly, that our district staff would respond to parents in a timely fashion, a day, hopefully 24 to 48 hours upon receipt of a message. I would hope we'd be able to get back to them and hopefully resolve their issue. Like I said, I keep saying resolve or explain, because board policy may not permit us to resolve it at all times. So then that would mean we'd have to educate regarding the situation so that there's a level of comfort regarding their question. Did I cover all
Well,
areas?
as a follow-up, representative organizations.
Representative organizations. I don't know how many organizations you would expect me to serve with. For example, United Way, Children's Services. So there might be some relationships that are automatic because we will see one another with regularity. Others, I believe they need to be heard. Maybe it's a town meeting, maybe it's a forum where individuals are able to address concerns. Maybe we would find that there are common concerns that need to be addressed within Indian River County. And then we would need to develop a strategy to move forward with that.
Okay, thank you. How could our district move towards more transparency? What steps and communication processes would you suggest? And please give examples of how you have created a more transparent and trusted district.
Again, I will reiterate that your website has a plethora of information, and I hope that our community is accessing the information, because then that could answer a lot of their questions, and it does lend itself to transparency. However, sometimes we don't do our homework, we don't research the areas of need, and we come forward with a question, and we need to direct folks to the proper channel, to the proper individual, to the proper resource that could educate them and create an awareness. As much as possible, I think that we should be transparent. Your meetings are now publicized. That's the norm throughout government in the United States at this point. That provides a window of opportunity for individuals to take a look and have board members, in this case, become transparent, as well as when reports are given from senior staff or from schools at board meetings. That creates awareness and transparency within our community. Perhaps it is a topic that you mentioned, the representative organizations. Organizations may request that a topic be addressed at one of their community meetings, at a board meeting perhaps, of the United Way, so that they have an understanding of something that's going on in education, where they may have a partnership with a nonprofit within Indian River County. Those are some of the ways that I have served in the past, making certain that our community members are aware of the current actions. We would want them to refer to the strategic plan so they are aware of our priorities. I would hope that each and every employee within the district is an ambassador, a very positive ambassador for Indian River County. We want individuals who you meet in the grocery store to be able to ask a question. I know many times that's inconvenient, but that may be the time to respond quickly, and then if it's a sensitive situation, issue a phone number and say, could you please call me tomorrow, or could I have your phone number so I could follow up with you? So the just day-to-day activities, I think we just need to utilize every opportunity to make certain that we are publicizing what is occurring in Indian River County.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. So the next section is performance accountability, and I'm going to turn the floor over to Dr. Schiff.
Good morning, again.
Thank you.
Can you speak some about your experience discussing racial equity issues and other equity issues in school districts generally, DSEG orders specifically, if you have experience with that, and talk about how you've specifically fostered community collaboration around equity issues in your experience in St. Lucie?
Yes, ma'am. St. Lucie County is a district that was under a desegregation order for many, many years. So yes, we had a lot of experience. We were all involved to some degree. We had finalized plans for equity and meeting compliance of the DSEG order by the time I became deputy superintendent as well as superintendent. So I did not have that firsthand experience. However, you review data annually to make certain that you are still on track, even though you don't have the judge overseeing your actions, to make certain that there is no regression in that area. Equity is important. Everyone needs to feel valued, no matter race, creed, color, gender. And we need to do our best to respect one another during conversations, our daily actions, as well as what we communicate to our students in the classroom. From there, I know that you specifically inquired about the desegregation order. I took a look at the letter that your superintendent generated and posted from 2016, understanding that you were moving forward in some areas and felt that you were compliant in the areas, I believe, of facility, faculty, and staff. Those were, I believe, the 3 areas where you had met compliance, but there were other areas that needed to be addressed. There is a partnership agreement with the NAACP that was also on file that appeared as if relationships had begun, but it does not indicate the work that has occurred since that time. I hope that progress has been made as you are moving forward to the final order, and that could move as swiftly as possible. There is always tension when this type of order is not satisfied, if you will. Individuals feel as if we need to find a common ground, meet the requirements of the order, and in St. Lucie County, I have to say, I felt like there was a breath of fresh air the minute that we were able to accomplish that goal. Folks began coming together in a more collaborative way, and I think that began by the committees, the desegregation committees that were formed to investigate certain areas and work together to advise the superintendent and the board of some progress that was occurring within St. Lucie County. It was a very long process, as I said before, and I can't stress that enough. And so when those tensions occur, it really does motivate us to move forward to resolution. And I hope that you could share with me, Dr. Schiff, the advancement that has occurred, especially with the NAACP and progress within Indian River County, so that we can determine our next steps and how to move forward with the plan to address all areas. And I want to say 13 total, if I'm not mistaken. Our attorney would have to confirm that.
Can you talk some about how you see school improvement plans connected with the district's strategic plan, how they're successful, and how you assess whether or not school improvement plans are progressing, monitored, and adjusted where necessary, and in relation to the strategic plan and the budget?
School improvement plans do not necessarily have to be reviewed at the state level annually unless you have title funds that are being allocated and there is a need for improvement at your site. However, that does not mean that we should not be taking a close look at it locally. So I would hope that there is a plan in place for us to take a look at each and every school's school improvement plan, determine if progress is being made. Is there disaggregated data so that we know of populations that perhaps need additional attention or areas of concern that could be addressed? From there, I would hope that it does align with the district strategic plan. And if I can look at my notes a minute here, I believe it's objective 1, yes, student success. We certainly could connect any and every school improvement plan with student success. You also want climate and culture to be positive, so there's a positive learning environment, that high-quality workforce, teachers that are capable and competent and appreciated and want to motivate students to do their best. So there aren't too many areas of your strategic plan that could not connect to a school's school improvement plan. I would hope that each one is uniquely different. Just like every district is uniquely different, every school is uniquely different. And I would hope that we would see the differences in the school improvement plan with unique strategies that could be implemented to bring about a positive change as we are reviewing data and holding schools accountable for the work that is being done at each site.
Last quick question. Can you talk a bit about your leadership style and specifically address your approach to holding others accountable?
I think I have a high level, a very high standard when it comes to accountability. I believe that you should be independent in that work and I should not be looking over your shoulder, so to speak. Which means I don't think the principal should have to be monitoring daily the teacher's performance if we know they are doing what they need to do. Yet there might be someone 2 doors down who is struggling a little bit. We do need to be in that classroom daily to make certain that we can remediate, just like we remediate students. What can we do to offer support and guidance to make sure that everyone is successful? When we succeed, we feel good. We want to be in that classroom. We want to be working with students. We want to be proud of Indian River. And so with that in mind, I would be respectful of others and make certain that we encourage you to take the initiative to do what's best.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. At this point in the interview, what we're going to do is we're going to have 2-minute follow-up questions from each board member. So I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Justice.
Thank you very much. And speaking with some of your references, they shared the fact that you were a superintendent with a finite amount of time, and in this situation, you would also be an interim superintendent serving a 6 to 12 months in a 6 to 12 month capacity. Can you talk a little bit about how you might formulate a transition plan so that the next leader, the permanent leader of the school district of Indian River County, can be successful?
I think it begins with a conversation with the current superintendent and staff, and then we design our work for the next 6 to 12 months. When we have that in place, it's solid. The board, the district is comfortable with those priorities and the plans. Maybe there's a modification to the strategic plan. Then we move forward with an action plan, and that action plan would need to be communicated to the incoming superintendent. I understand there might be a transitional period where the interim and the permanent superintendent may be on board together for a matter of days or so. But I would also believe that in order to make a commitment to Indian River County, I should have a phone available to that individual upon their arrival, or to the board members if there is a question about after I depart. There needs to be a fluid transition for the students and the staff of this district. And I'm making a commitment with a lot of passion that I would make a difference in Indian River County. And so for that reason, I would exchange contact information so that that person could reach out to me whether I'm here physically or at a distance.
Thank you. Dr. Schiff?
Can you speak a bit about how you build and foster relationships with your school board and how you can operate to build a cohesive school board both amongst ourselves and with you?
Great question. I only have 2 minutes here. I think that we need to get to know one another. You all are different as well, so your styles are going to be different, and I may need to just drop one of you an email message, and another I may need to pick up the phone. We need to build that relationship, that trust, through the means you are comfortable with, as well as one that I would be comfortable with. We would interact as frequently as needed. We would hopefully work with individuals. I'll go back to the relationship with FSBA because that made a difference when I stepped into the position a couple years ago. With that guidance, I have to say I've watched your meetings. You've become more and more collaborative when FSBA has been seated at the table with you. I think that's a very positive thing. Maybe that could help us transition as a cohesive group. I think we're all willing to collaborate. I've heard that word come forward many, many times when I viewed meetings. But perhaps with the support of one or more of the members from the Florida School Board Association, they could provide us with guidance to make certain that we do not go astray. This is a limited amount of time that we'll be working together. We cannot afford to make any missteps. And so I don't believe it's a big brother, but I believe that someone who has eyes and ears that might be a step away from us can many times interpret something and say, were your words the ones you really intended? What about your tone, so that we could work together well?
Thank you. Mrs. Rosario?
What is your view on school safety and our relationship with local law enforcement agencies?
It's critical. On a daily basis, unfortunately, you turn on the TV, you open the internet, and you find that there is violence in one or more locations throughout our country as well as internationally. I know that you each have voiced upon occurring in either written messages that I've read on your websites, or maybe Google, or maybe your material from campaigning, that you are extremely interested in the safety and security of students. That is paramount, and we need to work together, making certain, this is an area where we'd have to look at the budget. Do we have the funds for mental health? Do we have the funds to continue our partnership, and I hope it remains a partnership, with the SROs, because that is a huge financial investment if the district were to encumber it without the partnership of law enforcement. I know seated across from me, we have someone with criminology experience as well as professional development in that area, and I would hope that we'd bring the information that we have, that we're knowledgeable with, to the table in order to make certain that our students, our staff, everyone that works in this district, as well as our visitors, are safe and secure when they come to any building, any function of the school district in Indian River County.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, please provide us with a profile of the demographics, specifically diversity, of this district you have served.
2015, I retired. Ms. Berenborg, and I'm trying to reflect those numbers. In the area of Caucasian, we had I cannot give you specific percentages. I apologize. I am not prepared to do that today. But I could follow up with you. The Caucasian population was approximately 40%. Our African American was very close to that in St. Lucie County. And then the other population, the Asian as well as others, made up the smaller percentages in St. Lucie County. That diversity is different than Indian River County. I took a look at Indian River County's percentages, but I apologize, I did not reflect back on St. Lucie's.
That's okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. In Indian River County, we have 5 high-performing charter schools, and we have approximately 2,700 charter students. So not only do we represent the traditional parents, but we also get calls from the charter parents, which obviously we don't have too much that we can say about that. But in your experience, give us some examples of how you've been able to work with parents that might have concerns, or also give us examples of how you were able to build relationships with your charters in St. Lucie County.
We had a positive relationship as a whole with our public charter schools. We did not meet with parents as frequently as we did perhaps with administrators at our charter schools, as well as some of our staff members would be educators within the district as well as the charter school. And so we had an awareness of one another. We tried to foster positive interactions to the best of our ability. Over the 2-year period as superintendent, I stand corrected, as deputy superintendent, I visited each and every one of those charter schools. Made certain that if there was a change in administration that we met one another either at the site or at the district office, initially perhaps a phone call. That opened the communication because there are some decisions. There is millage that is shared with those public charter schools. And we will not always see eye to eye. However, we are all members of this community. I believe that the charter schools as well as our district schools want what's best for the students in this community. They are our future in Indian River County, and we need to make certain that we address all needs of all students.
Well, thank you. So that wrapped up our rapid
Okay.
questions that each board member has. At this time, let's take the last 5 minutes, and I'd like to ask you to give us closing comments on something that we might have missed that you would like to share with us, and also if there's anything that, because this is an aggressive search, if there's anything that we should know that maybe we haven't researched or it's not come up yet, anything that we should know ahead of time before we were to decide to bring you in.
I think the first and most important element is to indicate that despite the fact that I served St. Lucie County for 40 years, and I understand the St. Lucie way, the St. Lucie way is not necessarily the Indian River County way. Uniquely different districts require different approaches, different strategies, different communication styles perhaps. There may be some things that we have in common, and that would be phenomenal. But I do not want any board member to feel that I would be coming to Indian River County with a mindset of doing things the way we did them in St. Lucie County. When you step over the county line, I would become an Indian River County servant. Servant leadership is important, and if I were to misstep, I have a great belief that you would address that with me so that I would not misstep once again. And I would hope that we had that type of relationship where we would have an open communication. Indian River County has some phenomenal educators. I mean, you were just recognized with a state finalist for Teacher of the Year, and that's 2 years in a row. Vero Beach Elementary and now Vero Beach High School. How can we utilize those individuals and their expertise to make a difference in the lives of the students in Indian River County? I really got goosebumps to a little degree when I read the student comments associated with Dr. Nikki Molbesh. Mosblick, thank you. They value the relevance of her content. She makes science exciting, and those are the type educators we want in each and every classroom in Indian River County. How do we utilize her expertise and the expertise of others, because she's representative of the individuals who serve our students well in Indian River County? How do we then promote that in each and every one of our schools? That is critical to the strategic plan and to the success of each and every student. As we move forward, we will only have a few months to a year together. I think we are going to have to be brutally candid with one another in that this is the way I want to approach this. This is the way we want to work with our staff so that we can put that information on the table at the onset, have a clear understanding, build trust, and move on. My feelings are not going to be on my shoulder or sleeve, and I hope yours will not either. If we need to have a candid conversation, I hope we will do it respectfully, privately, behind closed doors, and maybe we'll agree to disagree, but we will need that in order to quickly establish rapport. That has been beneficial at all levels of my service over the 40 years in education. Since leaving retirement, I worked for a company in DeKalb County where we visited schools, and we had exactly 1/2 day to meet with the administration, the faculty, the staff, and formulate an opinion and a report. So I think we need to make certain that we are strategic in our conversations as well. Yes, I want to get to know you and find out about your families, but we also need to make sure that we are focused on the business at hand in Indian River County. I have stayed committed to advance ed and the accreditation process. I've served as, really we're volunteers on those committees that visit the high schools, and I've served primarily at the high schools, usually 2 per year. So that I would hope that we could then take a look at accreditation and make sure that we are valuing that, as well as I learn from those visits. Those are visits, and I probably would not take a single visit during the 6 months to a year. That needs to be clear as well. There's too much work to be done here in Indian River County. But I would hope that we can learn from experiences such as that and bring things back and have a conversation. Perhaps it would be FADS, the Florida Association of School District Superintendents, and some ideas and conversation would ensue that could possibly benefit Indian River County.
Okay. Well, we do appreciate, on the short notice, you coming in today. What we're expecting today is to have a discussion, and this afternoon we'll have a decision, and you will be hearing from us either way, and we appreciate you coming in, and we value your service to the state of Florida, the students here in the state. And do you have any questions for us before you
No, I would
go?
just like to thank you for the opportunity to be seated at the table today and the potential to serve Indian River County.
Okay, all right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have 10 minutes?
Yes.
Order at 10:15. I just want to say thank you to Dr. James Parlett for coming in this, it's almost afternoon, but this morning. We thank you for adjusting your time schedule to be here today for such a short notice and your willingness to work with Indian River School District on an interim basis. We take this responsibility very seriously, and we look forward to working collaboratively with the person that we choose to fill this important position. We're on a tight time schedule today, and we will only have 1 hour for this interview. We may not get to all our questions, but the way that it's set up is we have topics, and every board member will have 7 minutes to ask you based on the topic. At 6 minutes, you'll hear the timer go off, and so that means we have a 60-second wrap-up that we need to get to. We will be today we will have interviewed all the finalists, and we hope to make our decision by this afternoon.
That's great.
Before I get started, I'd like to introduce the certain individuals that are in the room. I'm going to start with our Vice Chair, Ms. Tiffany Justice, Board Member Dr. Mara Schiff, Board Member Jacqueline Rosario, and Board Member Terry Barenborg. Our Board Attorney, Mrs. DeAgresta. And then I believe you met Dr. Bill Vogel. He's our Superintendent Consultant from Florida School Board Association. And then John Reichert is our HR Consultant from Florida School Board Association. And then our consultant from Florida School Board Association, Andrea Messina. In the audience today, we have Mrs. Pam Dampierre. She is our Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction. We have Mr. John Teskey, who is our Operations Assistant Superintendent. We have Ms. Heather Clark, who is our Director of ESE. And let's see. And then we'll go over here. We have Ms. Peggy Poisel. She has been with the district for quite a while. She is the Executive Assistant to our Superintendent, so she would be serving in that capacity for a new interim. And then we have our Public Information Officer, Ms. Kristen Maddox, and then our Board Secretary, Nancy Esplin. And at the end of this, I'm going to quiz you, and I'm going to ask you their names, okay? That's your test.
I'm gonna fail.
I know that was quick.
Clarifying expectations.
So at this time, what I would like to do is just go ahead and open it up, and the first 7 minutes, I'd like to ask you just some basic questions to give us a background of your educational work experience and why you want to become Indian River County interim superintendent.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for having me here. I'm really very fortunate to be selected to be interviewed. So I thank you very much. I started my career as a school teacher, and I was in the classroom for about 9 years. I taught 5th and 6th grade, and I wound up leaving education for a while. I went into the private sector for about 10 years. I was assistant dean of the Hagan School of Business at Iona College for a couple of years, but then went into the corporate sector through a fast-track management program. And in a short period of time, I was the head of the public communications division of NYNEX, which is now Verizon. And you know, when you come home and you notice that your children are getting taller, you realize that you're not seeing them as much as you should. So I decided to go back into education, and I sort of never left education because during that time in the private sector, I was a school board member. I was elected to my local board. And I wound up spending 14 years as a school board member. So it wasn't a short period of time. So I kind of know, you know, 14 years as a school board member, 17 and a half years as a school superintendent. You know, I know the governance as well as administration responsibilities fairly well. So anyway, I wound up going back into education, and I became the assistant superintendent for business in the Valley Stream School District. And in that capacity, I was, of course, in charge of the budget preparation and presentation, as well as all of the financial operations in the business office. I was also in charge of facilities. I was in charge of transportation. So I had all of the finance and operations responsibilities in that job, and I was there for, I did that for about, I think it was about 5.5 or 6 years. And, but I became a superintendent. My superintendent told me I should be a superintendent, and I didn't want to do that, but because I really loved the business area. But I did, and I became superintendent of schools. My first district was North Belmore, which was an elementary school district. Had a wonderful experience as a school superintendent for 17.5 years. I never lost the finance piece of it. While I was always very involved in curriculum and instruction, and I like to think of myself as a curriculum and instruction person, I developed that expertise in school finance, and I love it. So in any event, in terms of my education, I have my associate's degree, my bachelor's degree. I have a master's degree in education. I also have an MBA that I did achieve at Iona College. And I have my doctorate from Columbia University, and after I got my doctorate, they asked me to teach there. I did teach, and I also teach online courses for Touro College, which is a small college in Manhattan. Not an online school, but they have some online courses, and I teach there. It's a Judea College, and I teach in the Graduate School of Education there. I just finished teaching a course in data analysis to improve student achievement, and also a course on communicating and collaborating and partnership between the superintendent's office and the community and so on. So I just finished teaching that course. And why do I want to come to Indian River County as an interim superintendent? Well, I live here, and so everyone has their ear to the ground, and when there's a lot of this talk about what's been going on, when it's been in the papers, and I know you can't trust everything that necessarily is reported in the papers, but there was a sense, I started thinking, and I said, I have been confronted with the same challenges. The fact that there's a feeling, or at least a perception, of low morale, and there's been some difficulties, and I've been in school districts, I've gone into school districts that have had very similar situations, and I've been able to resolve them very, very quickly. And I have, in the folder I just gave you, there's evidence of that. And so in thinking about all of this, I said, I have all these skills, I have all this experience, this is my home, this is my school district. I need to step up. I need to go in there and try to help, and to help them. At the same time, I want to say that with some of the negativity and so on and so forth that you hear and you read in the paper and all, we can't lose sight of the fact that Indian River County School District is a great school district. There's so many great things happening here. We have great programs. We have, we have the IB program, our music program. I'm blown away every time I see that marching band. I love marching bands. And so we have wonderful educational opportunities for children. And it's really important, that while we have to address some fundamental issues of, maybe reestablishing trust and getting everyone to, to work together, we need to also celebrate our successes here. We need to celebrate all of the good things that happen here. And, quite frankly, I'm very proud to live in Indian River County. The school district is a reflection of the character of the community. And we have a great community, and we have a great school district, and we can't lose sight of that. So why do I want to come here? I want to try to address those fundamental issues, clear the path for a permanent superintendent to come in, so some of those issues are already resolved and that person can hit the ground running, and also participate in celebrating the successes that we have, and at the same time move the district forward. We can't afford, as an interim, I would not be a placeholder. That's not the way I would look at it. We can't afford to lose time. So I would move forward, resolving those issues of reestablishing, faith and trust, and that's why I want to be here.
Okay, well, thank you. All right, so the next topic, well, the first topic that we're going to dive into is instructional leadership. And at the time, I'm going to turn the floor over to Mrs. Rosario.
Good morning.
Good morning.
From your knowledge of Indian River County schools, what steps would you take in using our strategic plan to improve overall student achievement?
Well, I think what's very important in improving student achievement, there's a number of elements or components that need to be addressed. And one is to make sure that we have a curriculum that has been developed and implemented that is aligned with the state assessments and standards. That's very important. It would be really a shame to have our students take, whether you like these state assessments or not, every state has them, and we have to prepare our children to meet and exceed those standards. So we have to have a sound curriculum that is rigorous, that is relevant, and again, aligned to the state standards and assessments. Having said that, I think one of the things that I have done in the past is to implement curriculum mapping. And curriculum mapping program is a program where every grade level and every subject is mapped so that you can ensure that the concepts and competencies and skills and content are being taught at every grade level. And curriculum maps are developed not only, let's say, fourth grade, not only by fourth grade teachers, but second and third grade teachers and fifth grade teachers are also involved in that. So everyone is lined up to make sure that the standards and assessments are covered and that those skills, competencies, and the content will, in fact, be taught. Because we don't want kids taking tests and they have questions and they're expected to know certain things that we haven't even taught them. So it's important to do that. It's also important to have an instructional framework. How do you recognize good instruction? I always had this with my principals. When you walk into a classroom, how do you know there's good instruction going on? And now, in the last several years, we have some very good instructional frameworks. I've implemented two of them in two different districts. One was the Danielson model by Charlotte Danielson. And, again, and the other one was the Robert Marzano model. And that model is the model that's used here in Indian River County School District. And they're very similar. They use domains that, take a look at, classroom environment, engagement of students, professional responsibilities, and those types of things. And I'm really very, very high on instructional frameworks because it does outline for teachers and for principals, for everyone, what constitutes good instruction. So I would really look forward to continue working with an instructional framework. I think it's also very important that we take a look at early literacy, okay? And we need to start to ensure that our children are ready early on, as early as possible. And we need to have in place early literacy assessments. Some of those assessments are DIBELS. What does DIBELS stand for? Dynamic Indicators of Early Literacy Skills, I think. So anyway, you have to do an assessment because we have to find out where each of our children are. Where is the starting point? And everyone knows in research we want to have as many children as we possibly can reading on grade level by the end of third grade. I've been to some of the Moonshot Moment seminars. I participate in that a bit here. And, that's what, and it's a great community effort because it's important to have the community involved in understanding the importance of that. And so I would make sure that we had those assessments and that we then would implement programs that would help the children that need the help. For example, Wilson Reading, okay, Foundations, which is a very prescriptive reading program that's used here in Indian River County Schools. I know that we use Foundations here. I would also take a look at, and I have implemented Foundations in other districts, and I would also take a look at Reading Recovery. Okay, Reading Recovery is a very good research-based program that takes the bottom 10% of first graders who are struggling, giving them very intensive reading instruction over a 10 or 12-week period. They can complete the program earlier than that if they're on grade level. And I have found it is an expensive program, yes, I know, but it works. It works. So you can use and investigate and implement a lot of these research-based programs in order to address early literacy. Children who are reading on grade level by the end of third grade are generally have a better chance of being successful through the rest of their educational career. Children who aren't reading on grade doesn't mean that they're not going to be successful, but they'll have a tougher time as we go through. So we really have to take early literacy. Just want to quickly turn our attention to our high school students, for example.
Okay,
Do I have time?
60 seconds. She had one more question.
Oh, I'm sorry, just
Go ahead.
cut me off, all right? Because I can talk
Yeah.
about this stuff all day.
Yes.
Okay, what is the ideal relationship between a strategic plan, instructional practice, student achievement, professional development, and school improvement plans?
Okay. I was very successful in implementing a 5-year strategic plan in Hamilton and also up in school district in New York. And I think that you have to have very specific goals, objectives, strategies to meet those objectives and to reach those goals. And they need to be measurable. They could be qualitatively measurable, they could be quantitatively measurable, but the goals need to be measurable. And they need to be connected to, again, everything needs to be connected to improving student achievement. Okay,
Okay. So, sorry.
that's it?
On that portion. So we're rapidly going through these questions. If you need to take a breath and a drink, go ahead. This is the time to do that. We're going to transition over into the questions on business and finance. And just to keep it in perspective, we have about 12 questions in this section to get through, okay?
I'll try to hammer them real quick.
So I'm going to turn the floor over to Vice Chair Tiffany Justice.
Good morning, Dr.
Good morning.
Parla. Thank you for joining us today. What level of involvement did you and will you have with the Chief Financial Officer during the budget preparation process?
Well, that is a very special area of expertise. One of the things that I would not do is to smother that person or to step on their toes. I would make sure that they had a wide berth to do their job. Certainly, as a school superintendent and having the level of expertise that I do have, I would, of course, converse with that person and work with that person. I would review material, I always do, ask questions, and I think it's important that whoever is the school superintendent, has a handle on school finance and to make sure that appropriate procedures are in place in the business office operations, such as, appropriate internal controls, segregations of duties, and those kinds of things, and that our reporting is accurate. So I would be looking at that, but I would make sure that the business person, and I've had this situation in the districts I've been as a superintendent, I make sure that the business official is free to do his or her job.
Thank you very much. The second question kind of it goes along with the first. What processes will you follow to communicate with individual board members to inform them about the details of the budget prior to the first and second public hearings on the budget?
Okay. First of all, I think that the budget that is formulated is a proposed budget that goes to the board. It doesn't become the official proposed budget to the community until the board approves it, and the board adopts it. So of course, there would be different iterations of the budget. There would be a, the first draft of the budget that would go to the board, and it would go to all board members, of course. And the board would have an opportunity to review it and to ask questions, to ask for additional information. I think it's really important in the whole area of budgeting to make sure that people, whether it's board members or eventually the community, they understand why you are proposing what you're proposing in terms of appropriations. What are you going to do with their money?
Thank
I think
you,
I'm
Bill.
running out of time.
No, you're fine. I have a couple more questions, so I'm going to move on if that's okay.
ahead.
Thank you. What has been your experience in addressing fund balance issues when the third and fourth calculations of the FEFP, so hypothetically, of the FEFP resulted in a decrease in district revenue? What steps have you or would you take to protect the district from such revenue variations?
Okay. I think it's, I've had direct experience with that. And by the way, I just want you to know I'm very, very well versed in school finance in Florida. I actually use the FEFP in my course, as well as the Florida Red Book, because they're very well written, very easy to understand, and they have all the elements that just about every state has in terms of state funding. I was in a situation that I walked into. I was advised not to apply for the job, but the more I heard, the more I wanted to apply for the job. And there's no such thing as a district going bankrupt, but for a lack of a better way of explaining it, the district was pretty much close to bankruptcy when I walked in. And it was a very precarious situation. There had been a $6 million cut in state funding, and the district had a history of failed budgets. And so I put together a budget, with my staff, with the business person at the time, presented it to the board, and they said to me, look, we know that this is what you need to do. We had to cut positions. We had to create efficiencies as well, and that's a big thing, making sure that you're receiving all of the state aid, state funding that you're entitled to, and you only do that by making sure that you submit the correct data to them, and you also don't want to get fined later or have to reimburse later on, so it's very, very important. But anyway, the board said to me, Jim, we hired you, and we didn't realize that you're crazy, that this is never going to fly in the community. And I said, I think if we get out there and we tell people and be open, honest, and transparent, what has happened, what position are we in, why are we doing what we're doing, it will pass. And of course, I said 2-1. So I did 24 budget presentations with my business official. I was on cable television. And in that particular year, there was a record turnout, the highest number of voters coming out to the polls in the history of the school district. And that still stands. And the budget passed just shy of 2-1.
Thank you for that answer. We work a little differently because it doesn't go out in that way, but thank you. That was an excellent answer. Thank you. I have one last question. It's a scenario that I'm going to present to you, and perhaps you could give us your thoughts on it. During executive sessions related to collective bargaining, the board discussion clearly indicates that the board wishes to present or accept a salary settlement that will either require that the board spend funds from the current year fund balance to pay for salary or health insurance cost increases, or is based on the assumption that the district will receive FEFP funding increases that are not accompanied by spending increases required by the legislature that are more than 3% of the current year's funding. What has been the history of legislative appropriations for the past 3 years with regard to providing this level of unencumbered funding increases? Will you accept the emerging position of the board? If you will not, how will you lead the board to a different position that preserves the fiscal stability of the school district?
60 seconds.
Well, I think that's a lot. I think that in Florida, there are certain regulations regarding, and also district regulation regarding the level of fund balance that you're required to keep. So fund balance, fund balance is it's not linear. There's different types of fund balances. There's your reserved and unreserved fund balance, as well as in your unreserved fund balance, you have unreserved, allocated, unreserved, unallocated fund balance. So I think it would be important to make sure that to maintain whatever level of fund balance we are required by law or required by school policy, school board policy to keep, to make sure that that stays intact. You don't want your fund balance to go too low, and you don't want your fund balance to go too high either, because that creates problems as you go forward.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Parla. Right now, we're going to move on to board, staff, and community relationships. And I'm going to turn the floor over to Mrs. Berenborg.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How would you build and facilitate a collaborative and trusting relationship with and among board members, school and district leaders, teachers, support staff, representative organizations, parents, students, business leaders, and the community as a whole? Please give us examples of your prior experience and success with building and facilitating those relationships.
Okay.
We have 4 questions in this section, so just keep that
Okay,
in mind.
so I think it's important with board that, between the board, among board members as well as between the board and the superintendent, that there be a trusting relationship, there be be truthful, transparent. I believe that any information that the board would want, let's say somebody says, hey, hey, Jim, I'd like to know the transportation expenses over the last 3 months. Board members are entitled to get that information. However, what I would do is give that information to every board member. So even though one person requested that information, I would send it out and say, this information has been requested, so everybody is on the same page. I think that that's extremely important. I think, again, going back to being truthful, being transparent, being accessible and visible is absolutely essential in beginning to build trust among all stakeholders of a school district. The tone is at the top. Once you demonstrate that and ensure people that they have you never silence dissenting voices. That's the worst thing that you could ever do. People need to feel comfortable that they could bring up issues. The one word that I do hate, I hate this word, retribution. Any district that I've been, anywhere that I've been, because I've heard that around, no, that's not happening, okay? People have to be free to speak their minds, to give their opinions, because it's helpful in the long run to everyone and to the whole system. So I think that if you demonstrate that, and I have proof of that in your folder, when I went into one particular district in New York, there was no trust. People had given up on the school district, and there was no faith. The community didn't support the schools. And in a very short period of time, one issue was the financial issue that I was able to resolve. But you can see I kept the emails, I copied them, and I gave copies to you, people thanking me for restoring faith and trust, and they felt that the school district was moving in the right direction. So I've been able to do that, and I've been able to do that in a very short period of time.
Okay, can you specifically talk about the representative organizations?
Excuse me?
Can you specifically tell us about you building and facilitating cooperation with the representative organizations?
Representative meaning?
Could be your union representatives.
Oh,
it
okay.
could be-
I have always had a very good relationship with my union president. Matter of fact, I'm still very much in contact with my union president from Wappinger. And again, we know it's not that we always agreed on everything, but we were truthful with each other. And I think it's important that you have ongoing dialogue. I'd like to meet with my union president on a weekly basis to just get a sense of what the issues are. And I've been very fortunate to have some very, very good union presidents that I've worked with. And we've been able to resolve issues together. And that's what's important. And I know we have time constraints, but I have lots of examples of how I've been able to work with the union, can disagree on certain things, but come to a mutual agreement about things as well. So it's a strong point of mine.
Okay, thank you. How could our district move towards more transparency? What steps and communication processes would you suggest? And please give us examples of how you've created a more transparent and trusted district.
Okay. I had to do that in New Jersey. And again, I think it's too long a story, but, you know, when I first walked into the district, I think it was either my first or second week there, I was greeted by the FBI, okay? So it's a whole big story about health insurance program, which I was able to resolve very quickly. And again, the important thing is, in terms of being transparent, is making sure that you have the vehicles to get information out to the public. You have to also garner a good relationship with the media, okay? I was always accessible to the media. If anyone ever called me, I always called them back. I had no problem with them. Sometimes I had problems with the camera coming in, but because I didn't look all that great. But in any event, I also implemented in 2 school districts, in my last district, a program called Board Docs. And I think the Florida School Boards Association uses Board Docs. And it's a great way to get information to the board, because there's a private school board portal, and then there is a community portal and a public portal. So you can get information out on Board Docs. People can go in and they can, you can get the information out that way, as well as keeping certain information that's confidential, like personnel information. You know, you could get an email or a telephone call, hey, make sure that you access your Board Docs, because the board site is restricted to just the board, the superintendent, and anyone else the board wishes to have access. So information could be sent very quickly to the board, and I think that open communication between the superintendent and the board is also very important to demonstrate to the rest of the community that we're working well together and that we're open. A real quick example, do I have time?
Yeah, you have a couple seconds.
Okay, a couple seconds, here we go. When I went into that district, the mantra was, be quiet. The ceiling is falling down. Shh, be quiet, don't say anything. And the administrators were like very tense about all of that. And we had some real difficult facilities issues. So what I did was I put together a tour of buildings and grounds with the board. A lot of them didn't realize how bad some of the schools were. And I opened it up to the community and especially to the media. And that's on the backup to that. You could go and it's on YouTube. The news did a YouTube thing on it. So you see me walking around with the board. But anyway,
All right.
that's it.
For that section.
Sorry.
Thank you.
On that.
Yeah.
So we're going to move on
Yep.
to the next section. And in this section, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, probably about 6 questions in this one. And it's around performance accountability. And I'm going to turn the floor over to Dr. Mara Shift.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I won't ask all 6, but I will try to get through at least a few.
Okay.
I notice also in your resume that you've done some writing and attention on equity issues.
Yes.
Can you talk about your experience specifically addressing racial equity issues in school districts generally and desegregation orders specifically, if you've had experience with those? And can you talk about how you fostered community collaboration around issues of equity in the district?
Okay. I'm going to have to do this real fast. There's a vast amount of
I know
information,
there is.
but I'll do this quickly. Equity. Actually, in my school finance and leadership course, we talk about the importance of equity and adequacy in providing equal opportunities for quality education that's adequate for individual students, and that's a big part of the course. But in any event, just one example. In New Jersey, we tried to improve student achievement of high school students by having them get high SAT scores so that they can be in a better position to get into the colleges they want to get in. This is just one example. So in order to do that, you know, children, before they take the SAT in 10th grade, they have the opportunity to take the PSAT, which is the preliminary SAT. And the thing is that funded by the families, by the student's family, and it's done on a Saturday. And what we have found is that we had quite a number of students from economically disadvantaged families. They couldn't afford to take that test. And therefore, they didn't have the same, they weren't on the same playing field as students whose parents could afford it. So I implemented a program where every 10th grader would take the PSAT funded by the district on a school day. And that really helped those students who would want to take the PSAT but couldn't afford the 100 or 200 or whatever it is, and they were able to do it. So that's just one example of equity. I know you have other questions. So
Thank you, that's a great example. Can you talk about some of your experience with the strategic planning process and its relationship to the budget, to school improvement plans, and how you monitor and assess that the strategic plan, the school improvement plans and budgets are all connected?
Right. In Hamilton, I developed a 5-year strategic plan, and it was a collaborative effort. We had not only board members as well as teachers, administrators. We had personnel, support staff personnel, as well as parents and community members that came together. We had public information sessions where we would get input. We also set up a computer access program where input could be provided that way. And we wound up developing, our goals in the strategic plan, but not only the goals, the objectives, and also the strategies that we would use to meet the objectives and therefore reach the goals, but we also set up metrics for measuring those goals. So if you wanted to improve the graduation rate, over a 5-year period, what would that increase be like? What would it be? Would it be a 2% increase in 1 year, and then maybe a 3% increase in the following year, 5%, and so on? So we set up those metrics, and then we would, of course, periodically revisit the strategic plan publicly, and we would review those real numbers, the quantitative numbers, to determine whether or not we were meeting our objectives and meeting our goals. And I have that plan. I still have that strategic plan. But it was also very important that the public participate in the development of that plan. And as I said, we had numerous meetings where people were invited in, the public was invited in to provide the input into that, as well as I said, teachers and support staff and administrators and so on. And it was a living document.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you one last question, and I think we're almost out of time. No? Oh, we're good, okay. Then I may ask you more than one last question.
Okay.
Can you talk a bit about your leadership style and how what is your approach to holding people accountable?
Okay, I believe in holding people accountable to make sure that they're doing the jobs that they're doing. I've had situations where I have had to file tenure charges against administrators.
Sorry, file what charges?
Tenure charges.
Tenure charges.
Yeah, tenure. Because there's tenure in New Jersey, and which means that you could lose your job. I know it's very different down here. It's very different. I understand, and I know what it's like here. But in any event, I've had to take disciplinary action against people before. So I'm certainly not afraid to do that, and I would do that if they were not. But certainly you want to give them opportunities to improve. They need to be told what they're doing wrong, what needs to be improved, and they have to be given the support in order to make those improvements. And but my administrative style is that I am, again, truthful, transparent, fair, and consistent. I'm very visible. That's been a hallmark of my whole career, that I'm very visible throughout the community as well as the school district. And I've been described as very approachable. I am not an ivory tower superintendent at all. And I think that really sends signals out to people that they can talk to me. They can feel comfortable in expressing views and opinions. And I think that that goes a long way.
Thank you.
About 30 more seconds.
In 30 seconds, give me 3 quick hits on how you will ensure a successful start to our 2019-2020 school year.
Okay, the first thing I would do is address, we would send a letter out to the community to describe to them all the work that has been done over the summer and how we are now prepared for the opening of our schools, and we would be recognizing the staff, everyone who has been involved in getting our schools ready. I would certainly have a opening day meeting with faculty and our staff to discuss, what our goals are for the upcoming year and, what the expectations are. And also to ensure them that they're valued, that we're going to support them. We're going to give them all the support we can so that they can do their jobs.
Thank you.
Dr. Parla, thank you so much.
that it?
We're not completely.
Okay.
So we are in the final portion of the interview. So at this time, what we're going to do is every board member is going to ask you a wrap-up question, and we have 2 minutes each. So I'm going to start with our vice chair, Ms. Tiffany Justice.
Thank you very much. I've asked the other candidates, and I'll ask you as well. You've been superintendent in some districts, and then you've transitioned out of those districts. I'd like to talk to you about what your philosophy is as far as a transition plan. How will you set this district up in the next 6 to 12 months so that we can put a permanent leader into place and they can be successful?
Well, I think that in a transition plan, you have to outline some of the issues that need to be resolved more immediately and some of the issues that need to be resolved maybe in a little bit longer term. Some of the immediate issues, as I indicated before, is that we do create an environment of trust and transparency in the school district. That's very, very important, and to celebrate our successes. So I would have a transition plan that would outline very specifically the kinds of things that would need to be done to make sure that we were ready for the school year and that we had very definitive action plans in place that would ensure that we would have a successful school year.
Thank you.
Can you talk real briefly about your experience? You mentioned you were on a board and you've been superintendent.
Yeah.
How will you use your skills to specifically build relationships among what is a relatively new board working together, among ourselves and in our work with you?
Okay, I think that, again, the fact that I have been a school board member for quite a long time, almost as long as a superintendent, I understand the pressures that all of you are under. Out in the community, working together. I've been there, done that, okay? I know that. As a superintendent, I've worked very successfully with school boards. And I think what's important is that every board member feel valued. I think that there has to be trust among you. You have to respect each other's opinions. I would make sure, as I said before, and I think this is really key critical, that any information that board members want, I'm not talking about personnel confidential stuff, that's all happens in executive session, but any information that you want, you would get, but you would all get it. I don't want there to be the appearance that, some board members have more information than other board members. You're all going to be treated equally. And you're all going to get, the opportunities to express your opinions. And, it would be important that all opinions are respected, all views are respected. And I think it also starts with the superintendent. I have to respect your opinions. You may disagree with me, and I have to respect that.
Thank you.
What is your view on school safety and our relationship with our local law enforcement agencies?
Okay, in school safety, this year, the school safety aid in FEFP used to be about $66,000. I think it was like $66,600 or something like that. And it went from $66,600 to $250,000, which gave school districts, Indian River County School District, the opportunity to have school resource officers in every school, including the elementary schools. In terms of school safety, I think it's important to have very definitive school safety plans. And some of the parts of those plans can't be shared publicly because they're confidential. You know, you don't want somebody who could be a potential perpetrator to know where every exit is in a building outlined for them already, so that kind of thing. And what I would do is every quarter, we would have a meeting with school personnel as well as the police department, first responders, the fire department. We would have a quarterly meeting to review our plans and to ensure that our plans didn't need to be changed, that everybody understood the plans and the purpose of them. I think I'm out of time.
Thank you.
I have a kind of a two-part question. First of all, I noticed in your resume that from year 2016 to 17 is kind of missing, so I was just curious what you did then. It was between Hamilton Township's public schools and becoming a senior consultant with Perkins Consulting Group.
2016 and 2017, I was already retired from New York. As I said, I was working in Hamilton. I didn't want to leave, but my mom was 90 years old. I had to come down and take care of her. And, you know, if that wasn't the case, I'd still be there. But in any event, the year 2016 and 17?
It was
Yeah, I was retired. I was
2016
here in
17.
Sebastian. I was at the beach. No,
The beach in Sebastian.
yeah, I was teaching. By the way, the school finance and leadership course is only taught toward the end of the program, so I won't be teaching that for another 2 years. But anyway, no, I was doing some consulting work with Perkins Consulting Group. Very little, but I was mentoring administrators up in Connecticut in a high school that was very troubled. And so I was working with those administrators there. And that lasted just several months, and it wasn't every day. I would go up there for 2 days a month to work with those administrators. Okay. And the rest of the time, yeah, no, I was kicking around here.
Oh, okay. And then can you provide us with a profile of the demographics, specifically diversity of the districts you have served?
Okay, and going back to Hamilton in New Jersey, we were very fast approaching 50% minority. And, you know, somebody asked a question, and I'm really sorry I failed to answer it, about desegregation. I have been part of a federal desegregation order as a board member. It was quite a number of years ago. It was settled by implementing plans, magnet programs in 2 of the 5 high schools that we had, which resolved that issue. Also in Hamilton, we were getting very close to a federal civil rights, and I was able to resolve that, but I don't think I have enough time to tell you how.
Okay. Time's up. Okay, so my question is, I was going to ask you about the board relationship, but Dr. Schiff kind of got my question because I had called one of your references and 9-person board that you had to work with as a superintendent.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, no wonder you retired and came back down to the beach.
No, I actually loved it.
Yeah, you did. So how, well, I am going to go ahead and ask. So how were you able to maneuver all those different personalities among a 9-person board? And so just talk a little bit about that.
A lot of humor.
Okay.
Okay. Again, you know, the tone starts at the top, and you know, there's expectations from the board as well as from the superintendent. You know, the expectations were that everybody be civil. And it's kind of funny, but when they would fight among each other, you know, especially in public, we would go into executive session, and I would say to them, look, I just have an announcement to make to the board. I have a pension. And I said, so stop, you're bickering. And everyone would start laughing. So, you know, you have to use some humor, and, you know, you have to demonstrate that civility is important. And, you know, I really didn't have any trouble with maneuvering all of them. I mean, some of them were a little bit more active than others, but, you know, by and large, they did work together. And I think it's important in the public eye that you have to sing the praises of the board, sometimes with biting your bottom lip, but you have to sing the praises of the board. you know, in many of the interviews that I've had with the media and so on, not that it's not truthful, it is truthful, you know, to say, look, the Board of Education is also very concerned about your children and about improving student achievement. Don't focus on just the negative, you know. So you're going to disagree and so on, but by and large, we have to keep in mind that we're all here for one purpose, and to help our children to succeed and to improve student achievement. And if we keep that at paramount, we'll be okay.
Okay. All right, so we're going to wrap this up. In closing, do you have any comments that you'd like to make that we've not gotten into, or is there anything, because
Yeah.
this is an aggressive search, is there anything in your, that might come up later on down the road that we didn't look into or didn't have time to look into? And you have 5 minutes, so I'm going to ask Ms. DeAgresta to give you a 60-second before your 5 minutes.
I don't understand. What do you mean, anything that would come up like, I stole a car or something like that?
Yeah.
Just come up from time
Did you
to
steal a
time.
car? Is this
I never stole a car.
confession? Okay.
At what age?
I don't know, well, yeah, there is one thing,
Okay.
okay? And it really technically had nothing to do with me, all
Okay.
right? But I happened to, you know, get saddled into it. When I went to one school district, the administration prior to me made a decision to convert, on Long Island, they had rifle clubs, okay, rifle teams. So they actually had they had rifles and live ammunition in the schools back in the day. So the superintendent prior to me made a decision, because the rifle teams all went away, that he was going to convert the rifle range into a art complex. Okay, that's a good idea. However, rather than remediating the lead in that art complex, he decided that they would bring in a contractor. They would dig 8 inches down in the sand with lead-laden sand and just spread it all out underneath the high school. Okay? Not a good idea. So when I came in, and again, this is right in the beginning of when I first started there, the DEC knocked on my door and said, look, we have some complaints. You have lead in your basement of your high school. I was like, what are you talking about? And make a long story short, you know, the reporters grabbed onto it. It became a huge issue. And, you know, I felt as superintendent I needed to deal with that and handle it, which I did. I cooperated. We brought in experts. We brought in a contracting company, an environmental company to handle it. But what happened was when I decided that I was going to go to New Jersey, I applied for the job. I got a phone call from the consultant. She said, Jim, I'm dropping you from the interview. I go, why? What are you talking about? This is on a Sunday. And she said, because, you know, I read an article about, you know, I said, well, I'm the guy who was fixing it. I didn't do that. That happened like a couple of years before I got there. And I gave her the name of some people. At the time, the regional director of the EPA, some people from the Department of Health and DEC, the board president, he wasn't a board president any longer. I said, just do me a favor, call them up. And then she called me back and she said, the next day, I guess it was, or maybe 2 days later, and she said, I'm so sorry, Jim. I really, you know, I said, you really should vet things out. And she reinstated me to go for that interview, and I got the job.
good.
So,
Okay. Well, there's still time to spare.
there's still time.
Do you have anything else that you want to say?
No.
Okay,
Not that I
okay.
can think of,
Okay.
you know, offhand. I mean,
Okay.
no.
Thank you
All
very
right.
much for your time today.
So we want to thank you for your interest and participation today. We know it was a short notice, and you had to spend your Mother's Day weekend preparing probably for this conversation today. What we're going to do today, this afternoon, the board's going to discuss, and we're going to make our decision today. And either way, you will hear from Ms. Messina. We'll give you a call.
Today?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm. You will know today, and that final candidate will begin negotiations with the contract, and that contract will be on our agenda tomorrow night.
Okay.
for the board meeting, yes. But at this time, we appreciate you coming in.
Well, thank you very much. It was an honor to be here, and I really do appreciate it, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to call this meeting back to order at 11:15, and at this time, board members, what we're going to do is just kind of review what needs to take place before our 1 o'clock business meeting, and I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Messina.
Yes, each of you were provided 3 pages of interim candidate interview summary notes. It looks like this. You do not have to use them. It's just something I wanted to give you to kind of guide your thinking. I knew that you were going to have an hour and a half or so, and you were going to try to kind of wrap your head around everything that happened this morning. So feel free to use that or not as you see fit. That's just sort of a guiding document if you want to use it. I find it helpful for myself, so I thought I'd share it with you. This afternoon's meeting, I hope that you'll have the opportunity to, between now and then, to come back this afternoon and really be able to articulate who you'd like to see this district move forward with and kind of come to an agreement. I think I mentioned this probably 15 times already, but I really would like for the board to have full agreement, if possible. It may not be possible, but if possible, that's going to put you and the interim superintendent in the best possible scenario for success in this district. So, Bill, did you have any other pieces that you wanted to add before about this afternoon?
No, I think that's.
I also want to say, you guys did unbelievably, you did an amazing job. You stayed on point. You just really should be proud of, I think, how this morning went. I think anybody watching it would be impressed with the, just the confidence that you all showed and the opportunity that you gave each person to answer the questions. So I just want to thank you for that. And, you know, I heard some really interesting things that I'm going to be thinking about. Not that I have a vote or an influence, but I'm going to be thinking about what I heard this morning, too. I think you got a lot to think about, a lot to wrap your heads around. If you have any questions for any of us before you take your sort of breather and find your space, we're happy to answer them.
I do, in preparation for when we come back. Would you recommend that we come back with somewhat of what we did last time, like our first, our second, and our third choice, sort of in that order, or just come prepared to talk?
I think you should be prepared to talk. I personally discourage ranking 1, 2, 3 because then you get tied into, that was my second choice. I think you should be open because most important, I think, when you're sitting on a board is you really need to hear what your peers are saying. And so, for example, the one that you picked as your first choice, if others said, for example, that's not somebody I think I could work with, that might influence on your ability to go, you know what, the second choice is just as fine, or however you want to think about it. I think you should be open to listening, but I think you should also be prepared to advocate for the one that you'd like to see the district work with.
I'd like to follow up on that too. I think when board members going the first round through, hearing everyone's impression of the candidates is really a plus. Before you really
Yeah, that's how we have it set up, and I'm glad you brought that up, Bill. We have it set up, and I know you have the script, and were we able to get a copy of it for the vice chair? Not yet, okay, we're having a problem with the email. But the way that it is set up for this afternoon is that your chairman is going to first call for public comment, second, call for each board member to make comments. So she'll go through, each board member will make comments. Maybe you'll say, you know, what you saw were the strengths, some questions that you might have, but you might share sort of here's kind of where I am, here's what I'm thinking. We hear from each board member, then we go around and see if each board member wants to make a second round of comments based on what they heard, a third round of comments. Once all the comments have been heard, and we try to keep them positive, that's one reason I have these guiding sort of questions, then the chair will say, if there are no more comments, I'll accept a motion. And so at that point, the expectation would be somebody would make a motion. I move that we extend, and I think the language of the motion is maybe even was on the agenda. Was it on the agenda?
Yeah.
I can't quite recall. I'm sorry, let me pull that out.
No.
Andrea, can I just, Mrs. Zorick, when that script is provided to me, if it could be provided to the other board members as well, just so that they have a copy of it and can follow along?
Sure.
Sure. Whatever, the motion would be to enter into negotiations with such and such a candidate. You'd be giving your attorney the authorization to do that. And then if there is a second, there may not be a second. If there is a second, then there would be discussion and a vote. If that vote is a majority vote, then that's the will of the board. If it doesn't get a second, or if the motion fails, then the chair would call for a second motion, which would likely be a second candidate, and then ideally there would be a second discussion, vote, pass, fail, however that would move forward, until you would get to the third. If no motion passes, then clearly we need to have more conversation. So that's really how the structure is set out for this afternoon. Everyone share thoughts, share thoughts, share thoughts. All of those thoughts are after you hear public input, and then a motion. Question, I can see it in your face.
I like that you reminded us that there's an opportunity for public input. And I would encourage anybody who is, here or watching, that we would really like to hear from you, who, wherever to look, camera. We really would like to hear from people. Is there anything that, since we have not been through this process, is there any advice or support you might give us of, and you may not be able to answer this, of things that we might want to make sure to remember to consider as we reflect on, looking for, deciding on our interim? That was inarticulate.
I'll let my colleagues answer that as well, but I would say this, based on the background of the three people you interviewed this morning, any one of them could help move this district, work in this district, and be the chief executive officer of this district. So given that, it starts to get into some of those, what some people might consider intangibles or priorities. And each of you are going to have different intangibles or priorities. So I would say you, at this time for your district, I think it's important to find somebody that all board members can work with. And you heard every single one of the candidates today talk about the working relationship between the superintendent and the board. So if you keep that together, kind of as one of your driving priorities, that would probably serve you well. Mr. Reichert or Dr. Vogel, do you want to add anything to that?
I think that you hit the nail on the head. That's the most important thing at this particular point. And I think you've done an excellent job of finding 3 finalists out of 48 after hearing the interviews this morning. So I think that, just like Mrs. Messina is saying, I think the person that you feel can bring the board together and move the district forward is critical.
Great, thank you. Get plenty of nutrients during the lunch hour and come back ready to work.
Go ahead. I have a
I
logistic
did
too.
have one final question. And did all the candidates agree that they could start on the 20th?
Yes, now, Dr. Moxley did mention she has a meeting, I think, on Tuesday with the chancellor, but if that's somebody that you choose, I would think that you would see a meeting with the chancellor as a positive thing for your district, and you'd find a way to allocate some time that she could do that. But other than that, they all said they would find a way, yes.
As far as logistics, any offer that is made is pending all of the pre-employment standards, right. As taken care of. All the candidates are ready to work with Mrs. DeGresta on contracts. So I think
That's right.
we'll be all set to go. And we hope, I think Dr. Suit indicated that hopefully we could have everything in order by Tuesday night.
So when we make a motion, does it need to say that it's a pending contract?
Yes, and we have that in the script.
Okay.
Add something to my comment about public comments, which is that I know a lot of people can't be here at 1 p.m, and I would encourage anybody who has thoughts or reflections to please write to us, to please shoot an email or something, because we'd really like to hear what you, the public, saw in those interviews that we might want to be aware of.
Absolutely.
All right. With that, we're going to adjourn at 11:25, and we'll be back at 1. Thank you.
Really impressed